I woke up after the accident, my head spinning, still lying on the stretcher when I heard the nurse say, "We called your only listed family member. Your son said he doesn't have time to come." My whole body stiffened. My son, Mason, the little boy who once cried just because I burned my hand, was now saying I was causing trouble. But before my tears could fall, I heard another sentence, one that froze every part of me. He asked whether you listed anyone as beneficiary if your condition got worse. They didn't know. I had just inherited $38 million from my maternal aunt, and Mason had no idea. I closed my eyes. If my son had changed this much, then I would have to force him to reveal who he truly was. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Hart, 68 years old, living in a small town on the outskirts of Orlando. Throughout my life, I had only one child, Mason Hart, and one remaining relative I still kept in touch with, my Aunt Margaret Hale, my mother's older sister. She lived alone most of her life. No husband, no children, few social ties, but she gave me a kind of attention I never fully understood. Only when she passed suddenly from a stroke and her attorney called me to his office did I learn what she had left for me. Real estate, stocks, bonds, investment accounts, totaling $38 million. I could barely breathe when I saw the numbers. A woman living on a dental office assistant's salary never imagines owning millions. I immediately thought of Mason, of his small family, of the grandchild I hoped I would have someday. I just wanted to share that joy with my son. My heart was full of hope then, naive hope that my love would be returned. That's why, after meeting with Aunt Margaret's attorney, I drove straight to Mason's house. I didn't want to call. I wanted to see the look on my son's face when he heard that his life was about to change forever. But halfway there, everything changed in a way I could have never imagined. A silver SUV ran a red light and slammed straight into the side of my car. The sound of metal twisting was so sharp I thought the whole world shattered. I didn't know how long I was unconscious. I only vaguely remembered the sound of sirens and the blinding hospital ceiling lights. When I woke up, I was lying on a stretcher, one arm in a brace, my chest aching so much that even breathing was hard. The nurse said I had a fractured left arm, 2 cracked ribs, and a mild concussion. I asked, dazed, whether anyone knew I was there, and the answer pierced straight into my heart. We called Mason Hart. He said, "He's busy." I thought I misheard. Mason had never missed my birthday or Christmas, not even a phone call. He used to be the most affectionate child I knew. But over the past few years, ever since he met Chloe, things had shifted, slowly but clearly, like a receding tide I hadn't noticed until the shore was bare and sharp. I told myself he might be in the middle of something important. Maybe he panicked and didn't know what to do. But then the nurse continued, crushing every excuse I tried to make for him. He only asked, if you didn't make it, who your assets would go to. A choked sound escaped me, but no words formed. My chest hurt so much I had to close my eyes to keep from breaking down. At that moment, no one knew about the inheritance. Mason least of all. I could only think one thing. If he reacted like that when he thought I might die, what kind of man would he become if he knew I was about to have $38 million? The next day, when the pounding in my head eased a little, I called Mason. I had practiced how to sound gentle, how to keep my voice steady, but even when he heard how weak I was, his voice stayed indifferent. "Mom, I already know. They called from the hospital. It's just an accident. Don't make everything a big deal." "But I was unconscious," I said, my voice trembling. "But you're awake now, right? I'm in the middle of something. I'll stop by when I'm free." He spoke as though I had simply cut a finger chopping vegetables, not as someone who had nearly died. I hung up, my hands still shaking. I felt like I had stepped into another world, a world where a mother no longer had value beyond what she could offer. During the 6 days I stayed in the hospital, neither Mason nor Chloe came. Not once. No calls, no messages. The nurses changed my IV bags more often than anyone checked on my well-being. I wasn't even sure whether the tears I shed were from pain or heartbreak. When I was discharged, the Florida sun was blazing as usual, but I felt cold to my bones. I braced myself on the taxi door, took a deep breath, and felt like someone entirely different. A woman who had just lost her last piece of innocence. On that ride home, I made a decision. I would not tell Mason anything about the $38 million. Not a word. I needed to know what had changed him into someone who saw his own mother as a burden. I needed to know whether Chloe was influencing him or whether something darker had been inside him all along. Something I had failed to see. I needed to see Mason clearly, so clearly that no doubt could cloud my judgment, and only then would I decide whether my son deserved to know his mother had become a millionaire. That night, when I returned to the small house I had lived in for 27 years, I removed the hospital bandage from my arm, set my bag down on the kitchen table, and looked around the familiar room. A chill moved through the air. I didn't know what I would find. But I knew one thing for certain. My life had entered a new chapter, and in this chapter, I was no longer the soft-hearted mother I used to be. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, my home fell back into its familiar silence. The old air conditioner humming in the corner of the living room, the muted sounds of the neighborhood drifting through the window. I thought Mason would call at least once to ask how my recovery was going, but my phone stayed still on the table, the screen blank. No messages except supermarket ads. I didn't know what hurt worse, the bruises still fading on my chest, or the absolute silence from the child I once believed would never turn his back on me. On the 14th day, my phone finally rang. The caller wasn't Mason. It was Chloe. Her voice came fast, clipped, as if making the call was an inconvenience. "Evelyn, can you watch Lily for me Saturday afternoon? Mason and I have an important client meeting." I looked at my still bandaged arm and the bruises running along my ribs. "I'm still recovering, Chloe. The doctor told me to avoid any strain." Silence. Not the empathetic kind, the irritated kind. "Oh." Chloe let out a short, cold sound. "I thought you'd try a little. It's just sitting with her. It's not like you do anything all day." A tightness formed in my throat. I need to rest. Chloe exhaled sharply, muttered a forced thank you, and hung up before I could respond. That moment, I realized they didn't care about me at all. They only cared about what they could take. My time, my labor, my willingness. And if they knew about the $38 million, they would want far more. That night, I stared out the window at the dew forming on the grass, my chest hollow. I wondered, how long had it been since Mason genuinely asked how I was doing? How long since he hugged me just because he wanted to? I couldn't remember, but I wasn't ready to give up on him. Not yet. I still believed people could be influenced by those they love, and in this case, that influence was Chloe, sharp-tongued, calculating, always steering the conversation toward expenses, financial burdens, and how older people should simplify their money to avoid causing trouble. One afternoon, I decided to try something. I called Mason. He picked up on the third ring, sounding rushed. "Mom, what's wrong? I'm busy." I swallowed my hurt, keeping my voice steady. "Mason, I have news about Aunt Margaret." Silence. Then, not concern for me or sorrow about her passing, but, "Did she leave anything?" My heart dropped. I answered slowly, "Just an old house. It's run down." I heard Mason breathe out, a long, disappointed exhale. "Oh, well, that doesn't help us." I didn't respond. If I did, I would have cried. How could my worth be measured against the value of someone else's inheritance? "How's your health?" Mason added, sounding polite but not sincere. "Decent," I said softly, ending the call before my voice cracked. That call rearranged every suspicion in my mind into a clear picture. Mason wasn't just distant, he was calculating, and he had changed after marrying Chloe. I replayed every vague remark she'd ever made about finances and responsibilities. Then I thought she was venting. Now I realized she'd been planting ideas, slowly, deliberately. From that day, I began noting every odd detail, not for revenge, for protection. A woman my age understands vulnerability in ways younger people never consider. I kept a small notebook, writing down dates, phrases, reactions. I wasn't sure if I would need it, but having it gave me strength. One evening, while preparing a simple dinner, chicken soup with carrots, I heard my phone vibrate across the counter. Mason had dialed someone, but accidentally left his phone on speaker. I only heard it because I was near the sink. His voice, low but unmistakable. "You're right. Mom really is acting strange. She asked the same thing 3 times yesterday." Then Chloe's sharper voice. "I told you, the accident weakened her. This is the perfect time to talk about reorganizing her finances before things get complicated." "Let's wait," Mason murmured. "Maybe see how she is for a bit." "Why wait? She lives alone. No supervision. A few more signs and we can request to help manage her assets. You know, older people are easy targets." Something inside me went cold. The way she said older people sounded like she was describing prey. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding in my ears. Mason didn't defend me. He didn't tell her I was fine. He let her words hang in the air. I stood there for a long moment staring at the warm kitchen lights reflecting on the counter like fractured memories. I once thought recording conversations was for paranoid people. Now I understood. When your own child begins viewing you through the lens of personal gain, you are no longer in a family. You are in a negotiation, and you are the weaker party. I placed my hand on the cold countertop, steadying myself. What I heard was not random chatter. It was the start of a plan. I didn't know what they intended, but I knew this. Mason and Chloe had begun preparing. And I had to prepare too, not because I wanted to fight my son, but because I refused to become a victim of the people I loved most. Deep down, I sensed the truth. This was only the beginning of a storm forming on the horizon, a storm I would have to face alone. The night I overheard Mason and Chloe's conversation, I barely slept. Their words pricked into me like tiny needles, silent yet painfully sharp. I lay in bed, one hand on my chest, feeling each breath come faster than the last. I wasn't sure what frightened me more, that Mason was planning something, or that I no longer recognized my own son. Around 2 a.m., I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. The warm light fell on a row of family photos. Mason, at 7 years old, smiling wide as I taught him to ride a bike. Mason at his high school graduation, proudly holding my hand. Mason on his wedding day, shy and glowing, while I cried tears of joy. Looking at those moments made something in my chest ache deeply. "How far have you gone, Mason?" I whispered. I needed the truth, not the version Mason might tell me, but the real truth. I needed to know what he and Chloe were planning, discussing, calculating. I needed to know how much of a threat they could become, and I needed proof. The next morning, I called Aunt Margaret's attorney, Mr. Stephen Doyle, a patient man who always spoke gently, almost like family. When I told him a small part of what was happening, his voice dropped to a grave tone. "Evelyn, let me connect you with someone. You shouldn't face this alone." That was the first time I heard the name Robert Kane. Robert arrived the following afternoon. He was in his 50s, hair flecked with gray, face stern, yet eyes steady and kind. Wearing a light blue shirt and a simple brown jacket, he didn't look like the kind of investigator you see on television, but his presence radiated competence and calm. "I've heard the outline from Mr. Doyle," he said as we sat at the kitchen table, "but I'd like to hear it from you. Everything, from the beginning." I breathed in slowly and began. The accident, the hospital, Mason's cold reaction, Chloe's phone call, the conversation I overheard. My voice trembled when I reached the part where Chloe suggested I might no longer be mentally sharp. Robert didn't interrupt, didn't react with shock. He simply listened, writing notes in a worn leather notebook. When I finally stopped, he looked up. "You believe they may try to gain control of your finances?" "I don't want to believe it," I whispered, staring at my hands. But I heard them, and if Chloe said it once, she'll say it again. Robert nodded, his voice firm. "You were right to call. If they have such intentions, we'll need evidence. Evidence they can't deny." I took an envelope from the cabinet, the one with photos of Mason and Chloe, one from their wedding, one from Christmas 3 years ago. I placed them on the table. "I want you to investigate their finances. And..." I paused, then said each word clearly. "I want to know what they say when I'm not there." Robert didn't ask further. He simply looked at me for a long moment, as if making sure I was strong enough to face the truth. Then he placed the photos into his file folder. "I'll begin right away. Keep everything normal. Don't let them know you're suspicious." I nodded, even as my throat tightened. 3 days later, Robert called me. His voice was brief. "Evelyn, I need to see you. Tonight." All day I paced through the living room, checking the clock countless times. When Robert arrived, Florida's sky had already dimmed into early dusk. He set a thick document bag on the table and opened it. One by one, photographs were spread before me. In the pictures, Mason and Chloe were sitting in an expensive restaurant in Winter Park, champagne on the table, both smiling brightly. The date in the corner, the second day after, my accident. The day the doctor said I was still under risk of complication observation. This was the day I was in the ICU. I touched the corner of the photo and it burned like a cut. "That's right," Robert said. "They were celebrating. And according to the recording I obtained, it wasn't just because of Mason's new contract." I looked up, waiting. Robert took out a small recorder and pressed play. Mason's voice came on, tinged with pride. "I didn't think Mom would wake up that fast. This accident came at the right time." Then Chloe's voice, sharp and precise. "I told you, this is the best chance for you to request guardianship. The weaker she looks, the easier things will be." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Robert turned the recorder off. "There's more." He played a second clip, this one softer, like a busy cafe in the background. Mason said, "She's been forgetting things lately. Looks like she's not as sharp anymore." Chloe replied, "Good. Just let a few small incidents happen. Who would know? She's old. One forgotten moment. One confused moment. And that's all the justification we need. I clenched my hands until my knuckles turned white. Small incidents, I repeated, my voice rough. They're talking about creating false evidence? Robert looked at me with sympathy, but also honesty. I believe so. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But instead, a quiet, steel-like stillness slid into my chest. Not weakness, something deeper. The sound of trust breaking. The words Mason once whispered as a child. "I'll protect you forever, Mom." Shattered into sharp fragments inside me. The pain quickly hardened into resolve. "I understand," I said softly. "They don't see me as family anymore." Robert nodded. "They see you as a target." I thought. Mason was just influenced by Chloe. I looked down at the photos. But no, he chose this path. Robert stayed silent, letting me breathe. After a moment, he asked, "Do you want to continue, Evelyn? What we find next? Maybe worse." I lifted my head. For the first time in weeks, my eyes didn't tremble. "I want to know everything. I need to know how far my son has gone." I pushed the stack of photos slightly away, as if that tiny distance might help me breathe. "And I need your help, not just to defend myself, but to make sure they can't harm me." Robert nodded, his expression firm. "Then we'll see this through." In that moment, I understood that my life had entered a new chapter. Not an easy one, not gentle, but one I had no choice but to right myself, with clarity, strength, and the sharp awareness of a woman who had stood at the edge of death with no family beside her. I looked toward the window where the streetlights cast a soft yellow glow. Family was no longer a place of safety. It had become a place I had to defend myself from, and from that moment on, I knew I was no longer the quiet, blindly trusting Evelyn. I was a woman who had been forced to stand up against the very son I had raised with my whole heart. I sat in the living room for a long time after Robert left, my hand still resting on the photos showing Mason and Chloe celebrating on the very day I was in intensive care. Their bright faces, the champagne glasses touching, my son's smile. It all felt like a blade pressed against the softest part of me, but that piercing pain transformed into something unexpected. Cold clarity. If they saw me as a target, then I had to see them as opponents. Motherly love couldn't protect me anymore. Only careful preparation could. The next morning, I went to Aunt Margaret's attorney's office. Mr. Doyle was already waiting, and Robert arrived a few minutes later. We sat in a small meeting room with soft window light, though the air felt thick enough to slice. I told them everything Robert had uncovered, and when I finished, I spoke the sentence I never imagined I would one day say, "I need a plan to protect myself from my own son." No one in the room was surprised, and that brought me a strange sense of relief. They didn't see me as paranoid or frail. They saw me as a woman trying to take back control of her life after being pushed to the edge. Mr. Doyle opened a new file. "Evelyn, you have two categories of assets. Assets that must be protected absolutely, and assets that can be used as bait." Robert nodded. "If they're truly plotting, we need them to believe their plan is working. People make mistakes when they feel confident." I shivered slightly at the word bait, never imagining I'd use my own vulnerability to lure my son into a trap he dug himself. But the price of misplaced trust was this, and I was willing to pay it. We divided the inheritance, $36 million transferred into a special trust, accessible only if a medical evaluation confirmed my full mental competency or if I personally approved access. No one, Not even Mason, with any potential power of attorney, could touch it. The remaining $2 million were used to purchase a new beachfront home on Key Biscayne, titled under an LLC known only to me and the attorney. It would not only be a refuge, but the starting point for my new life when the time came. After signing the documents, a weight lifted from my chest, as if I had closed a door between Mason and the money that could destroy us all. The next step was installing hidden cameras in my current house. Robert chose the spots himself: the living room, hallway, front and back door, and a small camera disguised inside a potted plant in the kitchen. "Not to spy on them," he said, "to document anything that happens when they visit." I didn't object. The sacred trust between mother and child had cracked long ago, and my safety mattered more than old ideals. The hardest part came next: acting. I had to convince Mason and Chloe that my health was failing, that my memory was slipping, that I was confused. I had to play the very role I hated seeing in movies, the frail older woman. But now it was my only shield. The first time I saw them after leaving the hospital was on a Sunday afternoon. Mason arrived first, Chloe next, carrying a pastry bag as a show of friendliness, though her eyes darted around like always, calculating. "Mom, you look better," Mason said, forcing a smile. I returned a vague smile. "Mason, what day is it again?" He paused. "Sunday, Mom." "Oh, I thought it was Wednesday." I let out a light laugh, subtle, believable, just enough to plant doubt. I saw two opposite expressions in that moment. Mason, his eyes dimmed, the corner of his mouth twitched, a mix of pity and confirmation. He wanted to believe I was weakening. Chloe, her eyes lit up, as though the missing piece of her puzzle had clicked into place. She slid into the chair beside me, her voice honey-sweet in a way I had never heard. "Evelyn, you should write things down from now on. It might help. You don't need to push yourself. We can help." The false kindness in her tone made my skin crawl. She wasn't offering help. She was guiding me into the box she wanted me placed in. I pretended to think it over. "Maybe I am getting forgetful. Yesterday I forgot to turn off the stove." I let the sentence drift out, slow and troubled. Mason jumped on it instantly. "Mom, that's dangerous. Maybe I should look over your finances. I can organize everything so you don't get scammed." I looked straight at him. The look of a mother who still loved her child, but knew he was crossing a line. I nodded softly, as if considering it seriously. "Let me think about it, Mason. I need time." Disappointment flickered across his face. Chloe pressed her lips together, hiding a smile she didn't quite contain. That night, I reviewed the footage. Chloe was snooping, checking the kitchen drawers, glancing at my filing cabinet. Mason stood near the table where I kept documents, his eyes filled with a mixture of greed and pressure. They were starting to believe I was truly declining, and that was exactly what I needed. Over the next days, I released small signs, repeating a question, holding the wrong key, misnaming a dish. Not too often, just enough to deepen their perception. Chloe became unnervingly warm. She hugged me lightly before leaving, asked if she should book my doctor appointments, even brought me a book titled "Keeping Your Memory Sharp After 60" as a thoughtful little gift. Mason slipped comments into every conversation. "Mom, I just want to help." "Mom, my friend's grandmother got scammed. It happens so easily." "Mom, someone trustworthy should manage your finances just in case you forget." Every word they spoke went into my notebook, the one hidden in the drawer of my nightstand. Not out of hatred, but because one day I might need it to defend myself. I knew I couldn't rush. Greed ferments on its own. I just had to wait for it to bubble over. Wait for the moment they thought they had already won. Wait for them to drop their guard. That would be when my trap, the trap they'd never expect, would close cleanly. That afternoon, as the breeze from the small lake behind my house drifted in, scented with blooming wattle, I was preparing a snack for Lily, Chloe's daughter. She sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs, absent-mindedly nibbling apple slices. Then she said something that made my spoon freeze in midair. "You know, Dad and Mom said you're kind of a little crazy after the accident." I slowly set the spoon down, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked calmly. She shrugged. "They said you forget stuff. And Mom said we have to be careful because old people forget important things." I sat beside her, keeping my tone gentle. "Important things like what?" Lily poked at her apples, then repeated something she had clearly overheard. "Mom said we have to help you remember where you keep your money. Dad said it's dangerous if you don't remember. Mom said if you forget, we should help. Like, find it." Her innocence was brutal, but it revealed everything. Help her find where she keeps her money. Not help me heal, not help me feel safe. Money. I smiled warmly at Lily. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. You're very kind." But when I turned to grab a napkin, my hand trembled. They had gone further than I thought. By early evening, the Florida sky was painted a soft pink-orange. Lily and I were doing puzzles in the living room. I glanced at the wall clock. 6:15. Mason had said he'd pick her up at 7. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When I heard the car pull into the driveway, I intentionally stood slowly, holding a glass of water and muttering under my breath. Mason and Chloe walked in with the same warm smiles I had grown accustomed to, warm like a mask. "Is it that time already?" I asked, sounding genuinely unsure. Chloe jumped in before Mason could answer. "Of course, Evelyn. It's 8 o'clock already." I knew perfectly well that if I said 8, they'd correct me, so I deliberately said something different. "Oh, I thought it was a little after 5. I looked around in mild confusion. I'm getting old. My memory just doesn't keep up anymore. It lasted all of 3 seconds, but I saw 2 completely different reactions. Mason, his eyes darkened, the corner of his mouth twitching, a conflicted look of pity and confirmation. He wanted to believe I was failing. Chloe. Her eyes flashed in a subtle way, a hint of satisfaction slipping out before she managed to hide it. Not a smile, just a blink slower than usual, but enough for me to notice. The camera in the right corner of the living room captured everything. I continued my performance. "Where did I put my keys?" I rummaged through my purse, then the drawer near the door. Every movement was calculated, just messy enough to look believable. Chloe stepped closer, her gaze sweeping quickly across the document table, then the wooden cabinet against the wall, the one where I used to keep bank statements. She asked in a half-concerned, half-directive tone, "Are you sure you're all right? Maybe I should organize your paperwork so nothing gets misplaced?" "No, that's not necessary." I shook my head lightly, appearing more confused than resistant. But only minutes later, when I pretended to walk into the kitchen to make tea, Chloe seized the moment and opened the wooden cabinet. Her hands moved fast, as if she had done this many times before. She lifted each bundle of documents, flipped through a few pages, then put them back almost exactly where they were. Everything was recorded by the camera, every movement, every expression. From the kitchen doorway, with my hair partly covering my face, I watched. The sight tightened my chest, but I didn't stop her. This was what I needed, concrete evidence of intentional behavior. No more guessing, no more vague comments, actual actions. When they left, Lily hugged me tightly before getting into the car. "Don't be sad, Grandma," she said, her eyes clear and innocent, exactly like Mason's used to be. "Of course not, sweetheart," I replied, smoothing her hair. "I'm just fine." But when the car door shut and the SUV disappeared down the street, my legs softened beneath me. I sat on the front step, arms wrapped around my chest. I wasn't weak, not at all, but my heart had taken another cut. Inside the house, I turned on the small monitor connected to the camera system. I replayed every moment. Chloe's eyes, her excitement at seeing me confused. Mason sighing with false pity. Chloe opening the cabinet to search for documents. No angle was obscured. The footage was so clear I could almost hear their thoughts. I saved everything to a backup hard drive, then called Robert. He answered after 2 rings, steady and calm as always. "Evelyn, is there something new?" "I have evidence," I said, unable to hide the slight tremor in my voice. "Clear evidence they've moved forward." Robert arrived in less than an hour. He reviewed each video, frame by frame. His eyes narrowed in concentration. When the final clip ended, he switched off the screen and turned to me. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "this is enough to initiate phase 2. My heart thumped hard in my chest. I knew what that meant. Not retaliation, but preparation for the decisive blow, the one that would collapse their entire plan by their own actions. "From now on," Robert continued, "just do exactly what we discussed. Don't resist, don't avoid. Let them believe they're winning." I nodded softly. I was ready. Not because I wanted to harm my son, but because I couldn't allow him and Chloe to keep seeing me as easy prey. I was ready for the next stage, even knowing it wouldn't be gentle. But my hurt had already hardened into determination. I would see this through. The phone rang on a gloomy afternoon, the sky tinted with a muted gray that matched the swirl of emotions inside me. Mason's name lit up the screen. I let it ring a few extra seconds before answering, making my voice sound tired, slightly unfocused, exactly what they wanted to believe. "Mom, we need to talk," Mason began, his tone softer than usual. When people need something, they often become suspiciously gentle. "What is it, son?" I asked, letting my voice tremble just a little. "Mom, I think you should let me handle everything." Mason inhaled as if choosing words that sounded less like taking over and more like helping. "I mean full power of attorney, so I can take care of your finances, bills, banking, everything that might stress you out." I stayed silent for a few seconds. That silence, I knew, made him think I was wavering. And right on cue, Chloe slipped into the call, her voice sweet enough to feel sticky. "Evelyn, you've worked your whole life. Why keep struggling? Let Mason help. You just need to rest." I imagined the expression she must have, wide, concerned eyes and a practiced smile. But thanks to the camera footage, I already knew what her real expressions look like. "I think maybe we should talk in person," I said slowly. "Yes," Chloe replied immediately. "Lunch tomorrow. We'll pick you up." I ended with a line that nearly made me laugh because it sounded so perfectly fragile. Maybe I should let you two help. The next day, the weather was sunny with a soft sea breeze. I wore a cream cardigan, simple, gentle, something that made me look like I was trying to care for myself despite being frail. Mason and Chloe arrived on time, wearing the triumphant smiles of people who believed victory was within reach. We went to a family restaurant. I ordered chicken soup. They ordered steak and pasta as if celebrating something. Throughout lunch, Mason looked at me like a dutiful son. except the devotion was bent into self-interest. He repeated concerns about my memory, my stress, my need for protection. Chloe played the anxious caregiver, touching my hand lightly, asking how I slept, whether I had strange headaches since the accident. They were good actors, but I was better. When Mason took a folder from his bag, I knew the pivotal moment had come. He set it on the table, pulling his chair closer. "Mom, this is the power of attorney. You just need to sign here and I'll handle everything so your life is easier." I opened the file and slowly turned the pages. Legal terms, small print, dense paragraphs. It was all meant to overwhelm. They assumed I wouldn't understand any of it. What they didn't know was that my attorney, Mr. Doyle, had already replaced the original documents with a harmless version, blank forms with no legal effect whatsoever. My signature meant nothing. I narrowed my eyes. It's hard to understand. Something, beneficiaries, trust, authority. "Let me explain," Mason said, eager but controlled. He pointed line by line, simplifying everything into comforting lies. I nodded, slow and uncertain looking. "You're at the signature page now, Mom," he said softly. I lifted the pen, letting my hand shake just slightly. I signed. When I finished the last stroke, I heard Chloe release a breath of pure, unguarded delight. "Evelyn, you won't have to worry about anything anymore," she said like a gentle breeze. "We'll handle it all." I smiled, a tired, grateful smile on the outside, but made of steel on the inside. On the way home, Mason said the line I had predicted almost exactly. "Tomorrow morning I'll go to the bank. The sooner the better." I nodded, touching my chest like an anxious old woman. "Yes. Thank you, son." But in my mind, everything was already laid out like a map. I had cameras installed. I had audio recorders set up. I had cloud backups ready. I had already informed my attorney. And Robert would follow Mason from the moment he left for the bank. At 68 years old, I was fully prepared to watch the trap close around two people who had treated me as nothing more than a resource. That night, I couldn't sleep, not out of fear, not anymore, but because of anticipation, sharp, cold, electric. I sat by the window, listening to distant waves and the ticking clock counting down the final hours. My hands trembled slightly around my jasmine tea, not from weakness, but from decades of motherly leniency finally giving way to resolve. Tomorrow, everything would be exposed. Tomorrow, they would learn I was no longer easily manipulated. Tomorrow, the trap they thought I had walked into would spring back onto them. I leaned back, closed my eyes. The reckoning was coming. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains in thin, warm strips across the floor. I sat in the kitchen, holding a cup of hot tea, waiting for the inevitable. At exactly 8:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mason's name lit up. I let it ring 3 times before answering, making my voice sound groggy, half awake. "Mom," Mason panted as if he'd run across the city. Something's wrong." I blinked slowly. "What is it, son?" "I'm at the bank. They said your account has $600. His voice cracked. $600! I paused just long enough before replying in the gentlest, most ordinary tone. "Yes, that's all I have." A dry, hollow sound came through the phone, a gasp mixed with disbelief. Then Mason's voice jumped a pitch. "That's impossible. What about Dad's insurance, your savings, the old accounts, your retirement funds, the joint account with Aunt Margaret? Where's all of that?" "Son," I said softly, "I've never had much. You know that. I live on my pension and Social Security." "Mom, stop!" Mason's voice sharpened into a near shout. "Where is the real money?" I heard Chloe in the background, tense and frantic. "Ask her about the offline accounts. Ask about that trust from Aunt Margaret." I inhaled slowly. "I don't know what you mean." The silence that followed landed like a stone in deep water. Then Mason hung up without saying goodbye. Less than an hour later, I heard a car screech into my driveway. The door burst open so hard it hit the wall. Chloe stormed in first, lips pressed thin, face pale like she'd been robbed. Mason followed, still clutching the crumpled bank papers. "Mom," he said quickly, voice strung tight. "Explain. Now." I looked at them with the most innocent expression I could muster. A look that hid a heartbreak so old it barely stung anymore. I had imagined my son rushing into my home many times, but never like this. Not out of love, but out of panic over money he believed belonged to him. "Are you two all right?" I asked softly, which only made Chloe look ready to explode. "All right?" She barked out a laugh, sharp as glass. "You're telling us you only have $600. What about Aunt Margaret's estate?" "What estate?" I tilted my head, the perfect portrait of a confused older woman. "Don't play dumb." Chloe stepped closer. "We know she left you something. You mentioned she was wealthy. Real estate, investments, savings. Where is it?" I shrugged gently. "Aunt Margaret left me an old run-down house. Maybe you thought it was something more?" Mason stared at me as if I had slapped him. No way. No way she only left a house. His voice trembled with disbelief. "She was rich. She did real estate. She had multiple accounts. She had to leave a large sum. You're lying." I shook my head, looking tired and a little sad. "Mason, I don't have anything big to hide." My son's face contorted. I could see the heartbreak, the anger, the panic all pulling at his features. Chloe grabbed his arm, but she too was shaking. "He cut back his work to prepare to take care of you," Chloe said, her voice rising with desperation. "We planned everything. You can't say you have nothing." "Planned? Everything?" I asked quietly. "For me?" Chloe's eyes darted away for a split second, but I saw all the shamelessness beneath it. Mason marched toward the kitchen table and slammed the bank papers down. "Mom, Tom's grandmother lost her memory. His family hid her assets and then took over through guardianship. We can't help you if you won't tell us what you really have." Guardianship. I knew the word too well, from the recordings Robert had shown me. I slowly sank into a chair. "If I say I have no money, what were you planning to do?" The room went still. Chloe, usually the quickest to speak, said nothing. She turned away, jaw clenched, eyes reddening, not from sadness, but from the realization that their entire plan had collapsed in their hands. Mason slammed his hand on the table, sending papers flying. "Don't act like you don't know. You have money. You have to. No one gets old and only has $600. No one inherits property and ends up with a broken-down house." I shrugged like an old woman who truly didn't understand where this chaos was coming from. "Mason, if I had money, I would have used it to help you long ago. Do you think I'd watch you struggle and do nothing?" That made him take a step back. I knew it hit the place he didn't want to face, because somewhere deep inside, a part of him still believed I was the mother who sacrificed everything for him. The problem was, he didn't want a mother anymore. He only wanted his mother's money. Suddenly, Chloe snapped. "What's that supposed to mean? You're saying we wasted months for nothing? That the guardianship plan is pointless? That we've just been helping someone who has nothing?" I nodded slowly. "If you two are trying to help me, then maybe yes, Chloe's face went pale. Mason looked like someone had drained the life out of him. He glanced around this tiny house. The old kitchen, the worn-out chairs, the walls that hadn't been painted in over 10 years. Everything in sight proved that whatever they believed about my secret assets or inheritance money had existed only in their imagination. But their panic wasn't because of the truth. It was because their own plan had just crumbled into dust. Chloe stepped closer to me. "Evelyn, are you absolutely sure you don't have another account? An overseas account? An investment fund? Stocks? A backup credit card? An old joint account?" I looked straight into her eyes, steady, calm, and said, "No, I have nothing. What you see is all there is." Chloe stumbled back, her face twisting like someone kicked off a cliff she thought was solid ground. Mason dropped into a chair, holding his head. "God, all that work, everything for nothing." "What work?" I asked softly, but enough to make veins rise on his neck. He didn't answer, but I had known the answer for a long time. In that moment, I understood. Their psychological collapse had only just begun. And the most terrifying thing for them wasn't the idea that I had no money. It was the realization that every tactic they'd prepared to take guardianship and grab what they believed I had was now meaningless to the point of being absurd. I sat still, hands around my teacup, letting the warmth press into my palms. They thought they had seen through me, but they didn't know. I was still holding the strongest card, $38 million they would never believe I was smart enough to hide. I knew things wouldn't end when Mason and Chloe left my house with ghost white faces. People who stake their entire future on imaginary wealth don't accept defeat easily. And just as I expected, not even 24 hours later, Mason called again. His voice wasn't angry like the day before. It had shifted into a strained, pleading tone. "Mom, I've been thinking, maybe I rushed things when I had you sign that power of attorney. Maybe it's better if you just keep everything the same. Can you call the bank and cancel it?" I tilted my head, smiling even though he couldn't see me. They must have stayed up all night talking, finally realizing that if I was truly poor, the power of attorney was useless, worse than useless. It made them look desperate. "Mason," I said, intentionally hesitant, I don't know, I already signed it. Maybe it's fine to leave it. You said it was to help me, remember?" No, Mason's voice jumped, losing control. "I mean, you don't need it anymore. I think you're healthy enough. Just cancel it, okay?" I let a few seconds pass, long enough for the panic on his end to deepen. "No, Mason, I'll leave it as it is. Less trouble." A long, defeated exhale came through the phone, and the call ended without even a goodbye. After that day, Mason and Chloe began showing up at my house more often, 3 times a week, then nearly every other day. No more fake smiles, no more forced warmth, only tension, frantic eyes, and increasingly invasive questions. "Are you sure you don't have another account? Think again. What bank? What old program? Which retirement fund? Did you hide cash somewhere in the house?" I kept playing my role, sometimes letting my hands tremble, sometimes repeating a question twice, sometimes looking straight at Mason and calling him by my ex-husband's name. Chloe always reacted the fastest. Every time I said something that sounded off, she flashed a tiny, victorious smile, the kind someone makes when they think evidence is piling in their favor. But she didn't dare accuse me of memory loss anymore. Saying it aloud would be admitting they'd been building that narrative for months. She had to swallow her impatience and pretend to be concerned. "Evelyn, are you sure you're okay? Tell me again, what day is it today?" I tilted my head. "Thursday." Tuesday, Chloe corrected, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She didn't know the camera had captured her entire expression. All the files were copied to Robert, in case they ever tampered with my devices. One afternoon, Robert called. "They're borrowing high-interest money, Evelyn." I froze. Borrowing? For what? "They believe they're close to gaining control of your assets. When people think a large sum of money is coming, they take risks. According to my source, they've borrowed nearly $40,000 to pay off old debts and to place a deposit on a project Mason is involved in." I closed my eyes. It didn't make me happy, but it told me how desperate they were, and desperation would push them to recklessness. "How far do you think they'll go?" I asked. "Until they face consequences or get what they want," Robert replied bluntly. "All we need now is for them to say the one thing they shouldn't." And they would. I knew it. People cornered by their own greed always reveal themselves. In the following days, Mason and Chloe began arguing right in front of my house. Their voices carried across the yard, loud enough for neighbors to pause mid-stride. Chloe couldn't hold back anymore. "You swore she had money." "You're the one who said Aunt Margaret was rich. You told me to pursue guardianship." "Well, you did it, and that old woman is obviously hiding something." "Hiding what, when the account has only $600? A dog barked from the neighbor's yard after a burst of shouting. A couple walking by slowed down, shaking their heads. I opened the curtain just slightly, Mason gripping his hair, Chloe shoving him away, her eyes red with anger. The fight echoed across my driveway, each word ripping apart the polite facade they had worn for months. My outdoor camera captured every second. That night, they knocked on my door again, close to 9 p.m. I opened the door, truly exhausted this time, no acting needed. "Evelyn," Chloe said, voice trembling like she'd been crying, "you have to tell us the truth. Where are you keeping the money?" I shook my head gently. "I've told you everything." Mason pushed forward. "Mom, please, we're about to lose everything. Do you understand that? Lose the house, the car, the contracts. You can't let this happen." "What's happening?" I asked, my tone airy, as if genuinely confused. "You know," Mason shouted, "you're doing this on purpose." That sentence cut into me like an old rusted blade, but the pain no longer tore me apart. It settled like stone, sharp but no longer capable of breaking me. I answered slowly, "Mason, I don't have money. Not a cent." Chloe let out a short, bitter laugh through tears. "You think anyone believes that? You think you can fool us? You think we're stupid?" I looked at them with no fear, no pleading, just the firm steadiness I had never needed until now. After they left, I closed the door. The house was so quiet I could hear the first drops of rain tapping on the roof. Near midnight, a faint sound outside woke me. I tapped the monitor connected to the cameras, and I saw them, Mason and Chloe, standing by my back door. Rain soaked their hair, their clothes, but they kept whispering. Chloe said, "She knows, she's hiding it. We have to force it. No more options." "I'm exhausted," Mason replied, sounding broken, "but if she doesn't talk, we're finished." I hit record. The wind made the footage shake, but the voices were clear. "Tomorrow," Chloe said, her voice stiff with anger. "I'm asking her again, and this time she will tell us. She's not getting away from this." I stared at the screen, my hand still on the record button, surprisingly calm. I knew my life was about to turn a page. I knew the real confrontation was near, because now I was missing only one thing, a direct threat from their own mouths, and I could feel it was very, very close. I still remember the morning I decided to call the police. A rare Florida morning without strong wind, not too hot, and the birds on my roof sounded like they were urging me to act. For weeks, I had let Mason and Chloe show who they truly were. I had recorded every glance, every word, every breath, steeped in greed. But now I knew I couldn't face this alone. I dialed Detective Marissa Cole, the investigator Robert recommended, someone who specialized in elder abuse cases. Her voice was low, steady, and calm, like a person who had heard 1,000 cruel stories, yet managed to keep her compassion. "You said you have evidence?" she asked. "I have plenty," I said, "but I still need a clear threat, and I know it's coming. We'll help, but you need to be careful." I gave a small smile. "I've been careful all my life. Now it's time to finish this." Within 2 hours, Detective Cole's unmarked car pulled into my driveway. She wasn't in uniform, just a blue blouse and khaki pants, looking more like a high school teacher than a police officer. 2 plainclothes investigators came with her. I let them inside and handed over all my recordings, videos, and written transcripts of every conversation. Detective Cole reviewed everything and nodded, her expression heavy, as if she felt some of my pain herself. "You did the right thing," she said. "All we need now is verbal evidence of a threat. 1 sentence is enough." "I think it'll happen soon," I replied. "We'll support you." She pulled a small device from her pocket, barely the size of 2 fingertips. "This is a microphone. Light, clips inside your shirt. No one will notice. You just let the conversation unfold." "I've done much harder things than this," I said, managing a faint smile. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're braver than most people I've met." I didn't respond, just nodded. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and now it had arrived. That afternoon, I called Mason with a slightly weakened voice, as if I truly were overwhelmed. "Can you come by? I'm feeling a bit lost." I knew that if I cracked the door open even a little, they would rush through. And just as expected, less than 10 minutes later, Mason's SUV screeched into my driveway. The door swung open hard enough to shake the front window. Chloe grabbed Mason's arm and stormed inside, not bothering to say hello. "Okay," Chloe snapped, her voice sharp and trembling. "Say whatever you were going to say so we know what to do next." I stepped back slightly, letting my hand tremble as I set the teapot on the table. The microphone, hidden beneath my 3rd blouse button, picked up every breath. Mason leaned over the edge of the table, slightly lowering his face toward mine. There was no softness left in his eyes, not even a shred of the boy I raised. "Mom," he said through clenched teeth, "stop pretending." I widened my eyes. "Pretending about what, son?" "That money," he hissed. "Where are you keeping it? Do you want us to go bankrupt? Do you think we can survive like this? Huh?" I took another half step back as if overwhelmed. Mason stepped forward, voice rising. "Tell us where the money is. Stop acting dumb." I heard Chloe suck in a hard breath. Then she slammed her hand on the table so hard the teacup rattled. "We know you have money," she shouted. "Don't force us to use another way." For a moment, the room fell completely silent. I could hear the clock on the wall tick once. The microphone captured every word, each syllable like a blade. I raised my hand to my chest and stepped back, genuinely shaking, not out of fear of them, but because the weight of this moment was overwhelming after everything I had endured. "You two," I whispered, "are you threatening your mother?" Mason froze. Chloe did too. I watched their faces drain of color, as if all the blood had been pulled out at once. Mason blinked, stepping back slightly, but the panic in his eyes didn't retreat fast enough. "Mom, that's not what I meant. Chloe cut in, scrambling to fix the mistake. "What we mean is that you can't keep lying anymore." But it was too late. Far too late. Both of them realized it in the exact same instant. Their words had crossed a line that could never be taken back. I set my hand on the table to steady myself. "If you came here to threaten me, then I think I should call—" "Don't!" Chloe shouted. "You are not calling anyone!" I looked at her the way one looks at a stranger. No, at the way one looks at who they truly are. The next morning, as I opened the window for the first sunlight, I heard police sirens approaching from afar. The sun was still low, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the walkway in front of the house. Then the sirens stopped. Car doors opened. Police boots stepped onto the concrete. I stood behind the curtain, watching Mason and Chloe get out of their car just as Detective Marissa Cole approached. "Mason Hart, Chloe Hart, you are under arrest on suspicion of elder financial abuse, attempted asset coercion, and threats against the victim." Chloe screamed, "No, this is a mistake. That never happened." Mason turned toward me, his eyes full of pain, anger, and desperation all mixed together. "Mom," he cried, "why did you do this? How could you betray me?" I stepped onto the front porch, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I didn't betray anyone, Mason. I only protected myself." Detective Cole gave a signal. Officers handcuffed them and guided them into the patrol car. Chloe cried, and Mason stared at me as if his entire world had collapsed. There was no responsibility left in them, no affection, only bitterness at their failed plan. When the police car turned off the small road, the sirens gone, but their echo still lingering in my chest. I stood on the porch as a cool breeze brushed through my hair, not joyful, not triumphant, just the moment when a chapter finally closes, quietly, firmly, and necessarily. The first morning after Mason and Chloe were arrested, I woke feeling half my weight had been lifted, as if years of burden had finally been removed from my chest. But I knew the road ahead wasn't finished. People like Mason and Chloe rarely accept consequences easily. I had to take the next step, leaving the old house, once my home, now only a place carved with scars of pain. I moved out on the very day they were released, pending their first hearing. That afternoon, when the sun had just dipped, the doorbell of the old house rang loudly. Through the camera, I saw Mason and Chloe in the yard. Their faces were far more hollow than the day they were arrested. Chloe looked exhausted. Mason pulled taut like an overstretched wire. Mason banged on the door so hard I thought the wood would crack. Mom, are you in there?" No answer, no sign of life, not a single breath. After several desperate minutes of knocking, Chloe burst into tears. "She's gone, Mason, she really left." Mason pushed the door, finding the lock replaced, the curtains drawn up, the living room empty. No furniture, no personal belongings, no family pictures, no trace of life. No way, Mason muttered. Chloe gritted her teeth. She ran. She ran away from her responsibility. They didn't know I wasn't running away. I was simply walking away from them. A choice long overdue and absolutely necessary. More than 200 miles south, I stood in the living room of my new home, a small but elegant villa in Key Biscayne. Bright wood floors, crisp white walls, sunlight pouring through the large glass door and stretching across the floor like a soft golden ribbon. In the distance, the sound of waves, steady as breath. I had left a letter on the table of the old house before leaving. Robert sent me a photo of Mason opening it, his hands shaking so hard the paper wrinkled. The words were simple. but they were everything I needed to say. Mason, I need a new life, one without violence, without schemes, without greed. When you are ready to face everything you've done, my attorney will speak to you, not me. I wish you luck in finding yourself again. Evelyn. Chloe skimmed it and nearly screamed, "A new life! Your mother abandoned us." But no, they had abandoned me long, long before I left that house. A few days after, settling into Key Biscayne, I signed papers giving my attorney full authority over all communication with Mason and Chloe. From now on, they could only go through Mr. Doyle, never me. One soft blue afternoon, I signed the civil lawsuit filing, $600,000 against Mason and Chloe for emotional damage, threats, and attempted elder abuse. Robert stood beside me, leaning slightly. "You're sure?" I looked at the lawsuit, then out the window at the shimmering ocean. "I'm sure," I said. It's time they understood that consequences are real. Barely an hour after the lawsuit was submitted, Mason called. I hadn't planned to answer, but a part of me wondered how his voice would sound now. "Mom," he said, breathless, "I just got the notice. You filed a civil suit for $600,000. You don't have the money to sue, but you can't do that." I set my teacup down, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "But you do, Mason." Silence. Then I heard Chloe shouting in the background, ask why she sued." Mason returned to the line. "Mom, why are you doing this?" I inhaled softly. "Because I must protect myself, and because you need to understand that what you did cannot go unanswered. But you're my mother, and you are the one who threatened me to take money you had no right to." There was nothing more to say. He hung up. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I only felt light, as if, after months of suffocating weight, my heart finally settled back into its rightful place. Life in Key Biscayne came to me gently, like a soothing melody. The neighbors were kind. Marlene, a house away, often brought apple pie. Mr. Richard next door loved orchids and always asked if he could water mine. People walking along the beach at sunrise greeted one another with soft smiles. I began to feel like I belonged. In the mornings, I made coffee, opened the porch door, and watched the waves roll under the early sun. Seagulls flew low. Children laughed somewhere down the beach. The world was still beautiful. More beautiful now that there were no angry knocks on my door. No painful questions, no thick air heavy with ambition. One afternoon, Robert called. "Evelyn, I have news." "Good or bad?" "That depends on how you see it," he said, a faint bitterness in his tone. "Mason's construction company just lost 2 major contracts. One pulled out because of the scandal. The other canceled because suppliers won't work with someone under investigation for financial abuse." I paused. Not happy, not sad, just a hollow ache I didn't have a name for. "And Chloe?" "She was fired from her assistant sales director position. Clients complained she was unprofessional and connected to the ongoing case circulating in the community." Robert paused, then added, "Justice is slow sometimes, but it has its way." I sat on the rocking chair on my porch, watching the waves fall over themselves, layer after layer, like life itself, always carrying us away from what once hurt and towards something quieter, kinder. I wasn't happy that Mason and Chloe were struggling, but I understood that what they were facing was a lesson they had created for themselves. Finally, with the salty sea breeze around me, I whispered to myself, "Yes, justice comes slowly, but it comes at the right time." And I knew, for the first time in years, that the life ahead of me wouldn't be defined by fear or betrayal, but by freedom, calm, and a new life, exactly as I promised. I didn't go to court that morning hoping to watch anyone suffer. I just wanted to close a chapter torn so deeply it could no longer be repaired. Key Biscayne was nearly an hour's drive from the Miami-Dade courthouse, and the entire way there, I kept the window open so the ocean air could fill the car with the scent of freedom. When I stepped into the courtroom, I saw Mason and Chloe already seated. They sat beside their attorney, looking strangely small. No arrogance, no defiance. Only two people standing on the edge of a cliff, carved by their own greed. The judge read the sentence slowly, each word dropping into the courtroom like a stone. Mason Hart and Chloe Hart are sentenced to 18 months of probation, along with 250 hours of community service. The court acknowledges evidence of threats, intent to coerce assets, and emotional abuse toward an elderly victim. Chloe covered her face. Mason didn't cry, but his eyes were sunken and red, like someone who had lost his entire world. Then the judge concluded, Mrs. Evelyn Hart suffered significant emotional harm. She is entitled to compensation. The court accepts the civil settlement negotiated by both parties, $400,000. I didn't look at them, didn't gloat, didn't feel anger anymore, just a long, tired sadness that felt like an old, deep crack. 2 weeks after the hearing, I received an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick up, but something inside nudged me to. Mrs. Evelyn. Is that you? A young girl's voice trembling. Yes, it's me. Who is this? This is Lily, and my mom is Chloe. I stopped breathing for a second. Lily, the 12-year-old who was always quiet when I babysat her, whose eyes darted nervously whenever Mason and her mother argued. A child who had never done anything wrong. Lily, honey, is something wrong? Her voice shook harder. Did my parents try to hurt you? I heard them fighting. I heard them say really bad things. I closed my eyes. No elderly person should ever hear that question from a child, and no child should ever bear the shame of their parents' actions. No, sweetheart, I said softly. They didn't hurt me, and I'm safe. But why did they do it? You don't even have money. That question tightened something deep in my chest. I had prepared to lie for the rest of my life, but to this voice, this innocence that deserved the truth, I couldn't. I shouldn't. Lily, I said, taking a breath, the truth is, I do have money. More than you think. She fell silent for a few seconds. You have money? I told her, slowly, carefully, gently, about Aunt Margaret, the $38 million, why I hid it, and how Mason and Chloe had changed once their suspicions turned into obsession. I didn't tell anyone, I ended, because I was afraid of losing my son, and afraid that greed could hurt not only me, but innocent people around us. Lily let out a shaky sigh. I didn't know my mom was like that. I softened my voice without a trace of blame. You are not responsible for the actions of adults. Do you understand? None of this is your fault. A long silence passed before Lily whispered, Are you mad at me? I let out a small laugh, my heart warming just a little. Never. I care about you very much. But you won't give my parents money, right? Lily asked, as if she were afraid she might lose some fragile hope for her family. No, I answered truthfully. I will not support them, because that wouldn't be good for anyone. I heard the girl swallow. But you, I continued, you did nothing wrong. You still have your whole future ahead of you. And if you want, I can help you with college someday. On the other end came a small, choked sob. "Mrs. Evelyn, really? Really? Really, sweetheart." Then suddenly Lily said, Can I hug you?" The question was so beautiful it felt like it lit up the whole room around me. 2 days later, Lily and her aunt came to Key Biscayne. As soon as she stepped out of the car, the girl ran to me and hugged me tightly, not out of guilt or pity, but out of something new growing between us, clean, gentle, and free of any agenda. For the first time in many years, I felt that I had not lost everything. Not everything withers. Not every relationship is meant to die. Some new bonds are soft, steady, and beautiful, if we are brave enough to open our hearts. That afternoon, as Lily sat on the front porch, her legs swinging to the rhythm of the ocean breeze, I looked at her and then at the bright blue horizon. The universe has a strange way of compensating us. It doesn't return what we lost. It gives us what we need. I lost Mason, but I found Lily. A different generation, a different heart, a different chance to love the right way. And I realized that sometimes new beginnings don't come from the people we once called family. They come from the people who choose to become family to us. I never thought that at 68 I would begin a new journey, not one to raise someone, not to endure someone, but to live for myself. But sometimes life pushes us to the very edge of pain so that we can finally see the path back to peace. After the trial, after the sleepless nights, after the tears shed for things I could not keep, I sat on my porch, watching the sea shift into a silvery blue, and I asked myself, what will I do with the rest of my life? The answer came as gently as the waves. I want people like me, older adults financially abused, pushed into despair by their own family, to have somewhere to hold on to, and that's how the Heart Foundation was born. I remember the morning we launched it. The sky was so clear it looked deliberately painted. There was no big ceremony, no reporters, no champagne or applause. Just me, Robert, and 3 new neighbors, people who had heard my story and said they wanted to help. I looked at the sign, Heart Foundation, the letters painted ocean blue, and I felt like I was laying the first brick for people who had never had a voice. I'm not creating this foundation for gratitude, I told them. I'm doing it because I know what it feels like to have your own child treat you like a payout. I don't want any mother or father standing alone in the dark ever again. Robert nodded, his eyes filled with a pride I had never seen from Mason. "Evelyn," he said, "this is something you should have done long ago. You're making a bigger impact than you realize." I smiled, and the sea breeze lifted my hair like a soft stroke from life itself, reminding me that it's never too late to begin again. The months that followed drifted by in a peace I once believed I would never touch again. No more heavy late-night phone calls, no more threats or schemes, no more feeling like a burden. In the mornings, I walked along the beach, letting the soft sand slip between my toes. At noon, I read under the shade of palm trees, listening to children playing by the neighborhood pool. In the afternoons, I made chamomile tea and let the last sunlight kiss my hands. People say old age is when life starts fading, but for me, old age is when I started truly living. One day, as I was watering the lavender bushes by my porch, the building manager brought me an envelope. "For you, Mrs. Hart," he said, sounding slightly hesitant. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Mason's handwriting. I stood still for a moment before opening it. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I let greed take me too far. I lost you, and I understand that's the right price to pay. I hope you are at peace. Mason." I read every line, then folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box beside my bed. I didn't cry. I wasn't happy or hurt. I just felt a soft emptiness, like a gentle breeze drifting through an open room. I forgave Mason, but I will never return to the life I had. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back in. I was grateful he found clarity, but I was even more grateful that I found the courage to move on. And then there were the special days when Lily came to visit. She ran through the gate, hugged me tightly, then jumped straight into the pool, laughing like wind chimes. Some afternoons we sat on the porch together, Lily with her vanilla ice cream and me with my strawberry, both of us watching the sea turn pink and orange at sunset. "Mrs. Evelyn," Lily said once, "it's so peaceful here. I love coming here." I patted her head and smiled. "Me too, sweetheart. When you're here, my home feels brighter." Lily didn't know it, but each time she hugged me, I felt my heart grow young again. The wrinkles didn't vanish, but the way I saw the world softened and warmed, and I understood. Blood doesn't make a family. Hearts do. Sometimes, on evenings when the wind is still, I sit on my porch and look at the water stretched out like a giant mirror. I think about the journey behind me, full of wounds, lies, betrayal, but also full of moments when I stood up, fought back, and refused to be extinguished. And I realized this: I didn't lose. I just finally found freedom. And freedom isn't loud. It's the sound of the ocean. It's a warm cup of tea. It's a morning with no one pounding on my door. It's the moment I no longer fear anyone. It's loving without worrying about being used. It's devoting the rest of my life to myself, to the people who deserve it, to Lily, to the elders who need the protection of the Heart Foundation. Freedom is the most beautiful victory of my life. And if you're reading this story all the way to now, I want to tell you something I often remind myself. We are never too old to start again, to choose something better, to walk away from what hurts us. Maybe you've been hurt too. Maybe you've been betrayed by family. Maybe you felt like you reached the end of the road. But if I could do it, you can too. I close this story on a breezy ocean afternoon, deeply grateful that I found the courage to rise. And I am grateful for you, for listening, for walking with me through this journey. Thank you for staying with me until the very last word. Which city are you watching from? Have you ever witnessed elder abuse in your family or neighborhood? Share your thoughts below. I treasure every story you leave. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you for being here. Truly. Mrs. Whitford, I'm sorry, but I saw this and I haven't been able to sleep. The photographer's trembling voice came through the phone. On my computer screen, she zoomed in on a photo from my daughter's wedding, and instantly, my blood pressure seemed to drop into a void. In the frame, my daughter's newlywed husband was pressing a red-haired woman against a wall, his hand wrapped around her back, their lips touching as if they had never belonged to Jacqueline. The worst part, the photo was taken exactly 2 hours before the ceremony. I collapsed into my chair, my breathing scattered. But then a cold thought slipped in. If this was real, then everything that had happened over the past 3 months, from the strange money requests to my younger daughter's disrespect, carried a very familiar scent: manipulation. And I realized this battle had only just begun. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I sat frozen in my familiar workspace, the room filled with the scent of pine and varnish, the place where I'd spent decades building our small family woodworking shop in Scottsdale. Yet Marcy Donalds' voice still echoed in my ears like a final alarm before disaster. I was 68, widowed for 8 years, believing my life, though lonely, was at least stable, until an unknown number called and pulled me into a storm I never imagined. "You need to come to my studio as soon as possible. Alone," Marcy said. "Please don't tell Jackie, not yet." That one sentence sent a chill straight down my spine. My eldest daughter, Jacqueline Whitford, or Jackie as people called her, had been married only 3 weeks. A grand wedding at a resort in Fountain Hills, where I'd spent almost $70,000 just to see my daughter happy, stepping into a new life with the man she believed was right. Daniel Foster, a polished, soft-spoken financial specialist who seemed so genuine even I told myself more than once, she found the right one. But I no longer trusted the things I told myself. Ever since Jackie's wedding, I'd noticed small but heavy changes. She visited less, but every visit came with money requests. The way she spoke, the way her eyes scanned my house as if evaluating assets, it all unsettled me, though I ignored it. Who wants to think poorly of their own child? And then, this morning, Marcy's call ripped the last veil away. I shut my laptop, trying to stand, but my legs felt like they no longer belonged to me. I braced against the table, feeling as if all the air had been pulled out of the room. I exhaled shakily, and from the living room, Lily's voice struck me like a slap. "Mom, where's your credit card? I need to put down a deposit to fix Brandon's car." I closed my eyes. Since Lily and her boyfriend, Brandon, had moved in temporarily, I thought I was helping her through a rough patch after losing her job. But temporarily had stretched into 4 years. Brandon lay around the house like he owned it, and Lily needed a few $100s from me every week for one reason or another. I stepped out of my workspace, already exhausted before speaking. "Lily, I'm busy. We'll talk later." "Later? You're always later." "I already told you Brandon's car broke down, or do you want me to be embarrassed out there on the street?" She said, embarrassed, as if I were the reason she was ashamed, not the 35-year-old man refusing to get a job. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the kitchen for a glass of water, hiding the tremble in my hands. Then Marcy texted, "Mrs. Whitford, I'm really worried about you. Please come see me tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything clearly." I set the phone down, feeling my heartbeat in a hollow space inside my chest. I didn't know what scared me more, the truth hiding in that photograph or the idea of having to tell my daughter. That evening, after a dinner, Lily and Brandon didn't bother to clean up. The doorbell rang. Jackie stepped inside, perfect as always. Cream blazer, expensive handbag, golden hair curled neatly. "Hi, Mom." She kissed my cheek, then sat on the sofa. "Daniel and I want to buy a house, a place in North Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, pool, great view. We just need you to help with $40,000 for the down payment." Just need you to help. She said it as if I were financially responsible for her marriage, as if the nearly $70,000 I had spent on the wedding wasn't a big deal, as if being widowed and running the woodworking shop alone for 8 years was invisible. I asked softly, "You need it that urgently?" Jackie looked at me as though my question was the unreasonable part. "Of course, Mom. The market's hot. Daniel and I have seen that house 3 times already. I'm telling you tonight because I know you'll help. You always do." I looked into her eyes and realized her smile didn't reach them. It was the smile of someone used to being given what they wanted, someone used to taking without offering anything in return. I nodded, neither agreeing nor refusing. She hugged me. a cold hug, then left. The headlights of her Mercedes swept across the living room window before disappearing, leaving the house in darkness. I stood still for a moment, then turned toward the kitchen. Dirty dishes, pizza boxes on the table, Brandon's shoes in the middle of the floor. I no longer felt like the homeowner, but like a resource for the selfish adults I had raised. I returned to my workspace, shut the door, and sighed deeply. The pine wall I had built myself last year felt like it was closing in on me. The darkness outside the window blended with the darkness inside me, and for the first time I wondered, how long has it been since I lived for myself? That night, I reopened Marcy's message, staring at the last line. I believe you need to know. I was a strong woman, but my eyes stung so sharply I covered them with my hand. Not because I feared the truth in the photo, but because if this was real, my entire family had been built on a lie, a very expensive lie. I sat at the edge of my bed, my hand still shaking. I thought of my husband, Jonathan, and wondered what he would do. He always taught me to trust myself, even when trust in others became difficult. And in that moment, I knew Jonathan would never want me to close my eyes and let this slide. I lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. I heard Lily and Brandon laughing loudly in the living room, every burst of laughter stabbing through my thoughts each time I closed my eyes. I felt like I was living with strangers. By 3 a.m., I was still awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the darkness. If this is real, Eleanor, you need to prepare for the worst. And I knew. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Marcy Donalds. No matter how cruel the truth might be, I had no way back now. I had to face it. I had to know why the man my daughter married had embraced another woman just 2 hours before his vows. And more importantly, I had to know when my family had drifted so far from love and whether I had the strength to pull myself out of the wreckage. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The Scottsdale sky was barely light, a pale blue veil over the distant McDowell Mountains. I tried to sip coffee, but the familiar smell did nothing to soothe the dull ache behind my eyes. I inhaled deeply, slipped on an old cardigan, and walked to my car. The drive to Marcy's studio felt longer than usual, maybe because I saw everything through the fog of my own dread. Her studio sat in the quiet arts district, a red brick building with large glass windows. I stood at the door for a few seconds, gripping my purse strap before pushing it open. The bell chimed softly, and Marcy appeared immediately. Her face was pale, her eyes apologetic. "Mrs. Whitford, thank you for coming," she said in a hoarse whisper. I nodded, afraid my voice would crack if I spoke. She led me through the small gallery into the editing room where a large monitor waited. Wedding photos I once admired now weighed heavily on my chest. Marcy sat, her hands trembling slightly as she moved the mouse. I need to say this first. I didn't go looking for these. I was adjusting lighting to finalize the album, but when I saw them, she stopped, inhaled shakily. Seconds later, the photo I'd seen the night before appeared again, sharper now, undeniable. Every detail of Daniel's face, every finger pressing into that woman's waist, the way her red hair lifted in the breeze, their expressions so familiar, so intimate. I swallowed hard. "Could you zoom in again?" She did, and when the image filled the screen, I saw the slim diamond wedding band on the woman's ring finger. A wedding ring! That realization forced me to sit. "I don't know who she is," Marcy whispered. I checked the guest list. No one matches her. I steadied my voice. "And the timestamp?" She pulled up the metadata. Date, hour, GPS. Everything aligned perfectly with the venue. I didn't understand all the technical language, but the data was clear. Numbers don't lie. 2 hours before the ceremony, I repeated, the words like stones in my mouth. Marcy nodded. I looked at the screen, but my mind drifted far away. Outside the room, I heard the city waking up, but everything felt muffled under the pounding of my heart. I remembered Daniel's warm smile, the vows he spoke. All of it now felt like a carefully crafted performance. Why? I whispered without meaning to. Why marry my daughter if... I couldn't finish. Marcy placed a small USB drive on the table. Everything is here. The photos, the data, everything I found. I don't know what you'll do next, but I thought you should have it. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing, yet felt heavy enough to break my spine. Why are you helping me? I murmured. She touched my arm lightly. Because if I were the mother of the bride, I would want to know the truth. I couldn't recall how I left the studio. I only remembered sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel while sunlight pierced through the windshield, as if trying to expose the truth I wished I hadn't seen. I sat there for a long time until sweat dampened my palms. Driving home, Jackie's words from last night replayed in my head. You only need to help 40,000. You always take care of us. I had thought it was entitlement, but now, with the photos in my purse, the picture sharpened into something much darker. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just fake love. This was a plan executed with precision. The lavish wedding paid by me. The demand for cash gifts only, Daniel's flawless behavior, Jackie's sudden change after the wedding. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed the image I dreaded. Money. Nothing else was the motive. I remembered Jackie rising from the sofa the night before, tossing out, "I told Daniel you'd agree. You always take care of us." Yes, I had taken care of them. I had raised them with every ounce of love I had. But somewhere along the way, they began seeing me as a resource, not a mother. A cold wave ran down my spine, not because of Daniel's infidelity, but because my own children had started tearing our family apart with their greed. When I reached home, I turned off the engine but stayed in the car. My house sat quietly under the Arizona sun, but I felt like I was staring at something rotten beneath its walls. Inside, Lily and Brandon were laughing as I walked in. Brandon's feet were propped on my table, and Lily was photographing a plate of food as though preparing for a magazine spread. Neither of them noticed my expression. Neither sensed that the truth in my purse could set this entire household on fire. I walked straight to my workspace and shut the door. I set the USB in the middle of my desk. Sunlight caught the metal surface, making it look like evidence in a crime investigation. I stared at it for a long moment, then leaned back. I'm not letting them take another $1 from me. I spoke aloud, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The sentence wasn't fueled by anger. It was shaped by pain, humiliation, and the realization that being used by the people I loved had hollowed me out for years. I didn't yet know exactly what to do next, but I knew I would never again let anyone, child or not, treat my life as their bank account. I closed my eyes, imagining the road ahead, consulting a lawyer, reviewing all my assets, preparing to confront Jackie, reclaiming my home from Lily and Brandon. But before all that, I needed one thing. I needed to be strong. No more soft Eleanor. No more mother who always yielded. No more woman who let people take advantage. When I opened my eyes, the sun had risen higher, washing my desk in light. I stood, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the cool metal knob. A new chapter of my life was waiting, one I had never planned, never wanted, but now had no choice but to write. And I would write it. For myself. For the truth. For the years of life I refused to give away to lies. I inhaled deeply and whispered to myself, "All right, Eleanor, time to move forward." I stood there for a long time, knowing that turning this doorknob meant my old life would crumble behind me, revealing truths I wasn't ready to face. But then I flipped on the light, stepped inside, and closed the door behind me. My familiar space, the pine scent, the shelves I built myself, the warm glow from my lamp, suddenly felt like a place I no longer belonged, as if I were a guest wandering through my own home. I set my purse down on the table and let myself fall into the chair, trying to breathe steadily to push away the tightness rising in my throat. But before I could gather myself, Brandon's voice boomed from outside, loud enough to shatter the fragile silence I was clinging to. "Eleanor, can you grab me a Coke?" His voice was low, commanding, like he was calling for a servant. I walked into the living room. Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet propped on the table, sneakers covered in dust. He didn't look at me, his eyes glued to the sports program on TV. His posture was no different from someone who owned the house. He acted as though he had long forgotten that he was merely my daughter's unemployed boyfriend, someone I had financially supported for 4 years. I kept my voice even. "Get it yourself, Brandon." He glanced at me, shrugged, and continued watching TV. Such a small gesture, yet it made me realize the last traces of respect had fallen away with time. Before I could return to my room, Lily called from upstairs, her voice sharp and irritated. "Mom, where's your credit card? I need to book a spa appointment." "This afternoon," I stopped. All day I had been trying to hide my pain, trying to stay calm, but Lily's demands for money pierced straight through the most vulnerable part of me. I didn't reply. I went back into my workspace and shut the door, this time harder. I sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out the wedding folder I had kept since Jackie began planning. I once thought it was a cute keepsake. Flower quotes, the photography contract, venue fees. But today, they were no longer memories. They were evidence. I opened the expense sheet. The number appeared clearly, $68,000. All of it from me. Not partially, not shared, all. Back then, I told myself I was doing it for Jackie, hoping she'd have a perfect wedding. Now looking back, I wondered, had Jackie ever thought about lowering costs because of how hard I'd worked all these years? Or had she simply pushed everything to the highest tier to maximize my investment? I flipped to the page about wedding gifts. Jackie once told me, "Mom, everyone prefers cash now. It's so much more convenient. Physical gifts are just clutter." I had agreed without hesitation. But now, remembering that moment, a different layer of truth surfaced. Cash gifts mean easy to split, easy to hide, easy to turn into something else. My breath grew shallow as I recalled those thick envelopes left on the reception table, love offerings from my friends, colleagues, and family, perhaps becoming part of someone's plan. I wrote down the number. Wedding cash gifts, $47,000, most of it from people I had known for years. I wondered, did Daniel know this from the start? Was he the one who suggested cash only? Or was it Jackie? I didn't want to believe that. But the photos Marcy had shown me had ripped open a door of truth that I could no longer shut. I picked up a pen, my hand still trembling, and began writing every detail I remembered. The day Jackie insisted on cash gifts, the times Daniel praised me for being generous, how they talked about their financial future as if already calculated. The occasions Jackie dodged questions about their joint accounts. I didn't know why I was writing all of this, but something instinctive told me I needed to record every piece. As though, if I didn't, the fragments would vanish and I'd never be able to assemble the terrifying picture taking shape. The door creaked open. Lily walked in without knocking. "Mom, I called you and you didn't answer. What's wrong? Are you overthinking things again?" I looked up at her. Lily's expression was not concern. It was irritation that I hadn't answered her demands. She crossed her arms and sighed. "Mom, don't think too much. The older you get, the more paranoid you become. Life isn't that complicated." That sentence, simple, careless, and dismissive, cut deeper than anything else today. I looked at my younger daughter. The same, 34-year-old who once cried into my arms after her first breakup. The same girl who sat behind me during that long summer road trip across Arizona. The same child I held when she felt life was unfair, now standing in front of me, seeing her mother as an obstacle. It felt like something gripped my heart tightly. Not anger, but a sadness so sharp I couldn't breathe. Lily rolled her eyes. "I'm going to the spa. Brandon's hungry. Can you make him something?" She closed the door before I could answer. I sat still, my hand resting on the open page. The lines I had written blurred as my eyes burned. It took me several minutes to realize I was crying, not because of Daniel, not because of Jackie, but because of Lily, because my own daughter saw me as an ATM and a shadow easy to manipulate. I wiped my face, inhaled, and felt something small but powerful shift inside me. Something long buried began to rise. Self-protection. I wrote another line in my notebook. My daughter sees me as a tool. Her boyfriend treats my home as his own. That single line, though written as a note, felt like the first time I had called the truth by its real name. I could not stay silent forever. I could not keep closing my eyes. I could not let the rest of my years be used for purposes I never agreed to. That night, for the first time in years, I locked my bedroom door. Lily knocked a few times, calling my name, but I didn't open it. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, letting silence fill the room. I knew I had crossed an invisible boundary, the boundary between endurance and awakening. I whispered into the darkness, a quiet vow to myself. Enough. Eleanor won't stay silent anymore. And I knew everything would change from here. But I also knew it was what I needed to reclaim what was left of my peace. I thought I might sleep a little that night, after such a long day and discoveries that squeezed my heart until it hurt. But as I changed clothes and reached for the bedroom light switch, I heard Lily's voice coming from the living room. Her tone was bright and overly cheerful, completely different from the indifference she had shown me earlier. I froze, my hand still on the switch. A sharp instinct crawled up my spine. I needed to listen. I cracked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet except for the warm light from the living room glowing onto the ceiling. Lily's voice echoed. She had put the call on speaker, as if the conversation needed no privacy, no consideration for anyone sharing the house. I stood on the stairs, hidden in the dark, heart pounding without knowing why. "Tell me again," Lily laughed, a sugary laugh with something sour underneath. "She's really gonna dump him? In 2 months?" Then Jackie's voice came through. Clear, cold, nothing like the girl who once held my hand running along Santa Monica Beach when she was 10. "Yeah, in 2 months it'll be done. Clean divorce, no. Drama. And we split the wedding gifts 60-40. I get the bigger share because Mom paid for the whole wedding." I gripped the wooden railing so hard that my fingertips went numb. My heart twisted, then dropped as if losing all warmth at once. Lily burst into laughter. Oh my God, she'd faint if she knew, but she won't. Mom's old, so easy to fool. The words old and easy to fool cut through me like a thin, cold blade. I stood frozen, my breath breaking in my chest. Not because Jackie was planning a divorce, not because they were dividing wedding gifts like loot, but because my daughter, the one I raised with everything I had, called me those words without hesitation or compassion. Jackie continued, her voice emotionless, like discussing a bargain item. Once everything's done, I'll tell Mom I need to move out, start fresh after the heartbreak. She'll feel sorry for me and pay the down payment automatically. She always does. Lily chimed in immediately. I'm doing the same thing with Mom. She's used to it. Yesterday I told her my car broke down and she's already thinking of buying me a new one. I just need to ask a few more times so she gets used to spending. I nearly lost my grip on the railing. I, who had raised both girls with money earned from sweat in our woodworking shop, had turned into a wallet they could manipulate and practice tactics on. Lily's voice rang out again. Brandon says she's predictable. Say something sweet and she believes it. I mentioned wanting to go to the spa and she didn't even dare say no. That's what happens when you're old. My legs shook so hard I had to lean into the wall to stay upright. Not from insult, from clarity. Clarity that the people I loved had been treating my affection as something cheap. I steadied my breath, trying not to let a sob escape. Lily would hear it. She would know. Jackie spoke again. Just make her think Daniel and I are genuinely happy. When the divorce happens, I'll play the betrayed wife. She'll blame him and open her wallet. The house deposit will take care of itself. Lily asked, curious. What about Mom's trust? I heard old people change wills all the time. Jackie answered casually, who knows? But let's take advantage while she's still soft. Old people are all emotional. I heard chairs moving and more laughter, bright, carefree laughter, as if they were enjoying a late-night comedy, unaware that every word was slicing my heart open. I backed away from the stairs step by step, like a ghost drifting through its own home. The house felt suffocating, the walls closing in. I retreated to my room and locked the door with trembling hands. Under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the uneven beats. Every emotional defense I had collapsed within minutes. What I heard wasn't just betrayal, it was a coordinated plan, calculated by the daughters I had poured the best years of my life into loving and protecting. I sat at the edge of my bed, not crying, not screaming. The pain was so deep that the tears felt trapped in my throat. I only felt cold, a coldness that seeped to the bone. I thought of Jackie as a child, her tiny hand gripping my shirt when she feared thunderstorms. I thought of Lily running into my arms, sobbing after her first fall. Those memories clashed violently with the present, two worlds that no longer touched. The maternal love inside me, always gentle, patient, forgiving, fractured like glass, struck with a hammer. I whispered to the empty room, my voice barely audible. How could you? But the question floated in the air, unanswered. I walked to my desk and looked at the open notebook with the list of suspicions I had started hours earlier. I added a new line, writing slowly, each stroke carving into my heart. They are not only using me, they are performing behind my back. Then a clear thought rose in my mind, bright as a lamp turning on in the dark. I cannot let this continue for even one more day. Facing two manipulative daughters and a deceitful man like Daniel would not be easy. but the truth I heard tonight had transformed my pain into resolve. If I didn't act now, if I kept softening, kept believing sweet, empty words, I would lose everything, including myself. I closed the notebook, breathed deeply to steady myself. And in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. Tomorrow, I would see a lawyer. I would no longer allow myself to be led around. I would no longer let the people I once loved control every breath of my remaining years. I turned off the light. The room fell into darkness, but in my heart, for the first time in a long while, a faint glow, small but unmistakable, began to rise. Not hope, strength. A strength I never thought I still had after 68. And so, in the quiet of the night, I took my first step out of the hurt and onto the path where I would reclaim my life. I arrived at attorney Harold McIntyre's office the next morning, a mix of tension and determination churning inside me. The late June Scottsdale sun burned fiercely, its light shimmering against the pavement. I sat in my car for a moment, my hand resting on the steering wheel, feeling as if I were about to step into a confrontation I had never imagined facing. All my life, I had been the mediator, the peacemaker, the one who soothed family conflicts. But today, for the first time, I was here to declare something. I would protect myself. Harold's office was inside a quiet, elegant 3-story glass building. The sign reading Harold McIntyre, Family and Estate Law was mounted near the entrance, gold lettering on walnut. Inside, the soft scent of pine and fresh paper greeted me, reminding me of my late husband's workshop, where he once spent hours at the lathe. The memory nearly made me wobble. Harold stood as soon as his assistant led me into the IE conference room. He looked to be in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, formal demeanor, but calm, respectful eyes, the kind that made people trust him without being told to. "Mrs. Whitford," he said, extending a hand, his deep voice steady. "Please have a seat. My assistant said you have an urgent matter?" I took a deep breath, set my bag on the glass table, then pulled out the USB Marcy had given me, along with the notebook filled with numbers, dates, and the conversations I'd heard the night before. "I need you to look at these," I said, hearing my own voice tremble slightly. I think my daughters are deceiving me, and my son-in-law too." Harold tilted his head, not surprised, simply turning on his computer and inserting the USB. When the photos appeared, Daniel holding the red-haired woman tightly, his hand tangled in her hair, he frowned and took precise notes. "Does this photo have metadata?" he asked. "Yes, the photographer verified everything for me." "Good, very good." What struck me was that he didn't react with shock or pity. He received everything with a cool professionalism, but not indifference. A part of me felt steadier. Clearly, this was not beyond his ability to handle. "And this," I said, opening the notebook to the page where I had written down the conversation between Lily and Jackie, my voice gradually more even, more solid, "is what I heard last night." Harold read without interrupting. He simply nodded a few times, as if each line was fitting into a picture he had already partly predicted. When I finished, he set the USB on the table and said, "Mrs. Eleanor, I want you to understand something clearly. This is no longer a normal family issue. This is deliberate financial exploitation." I leaned back. Hearing it spoken aloud by someone else made it real. It was no longer a passing nightmare. It was truth I couldn't deny. "Now," Harold continued, "I need you to provide everything you have. The photos, notes, wedding expense sheets, messages, anything at all." I handed everything to him. They spread across the large table. the evidence of 3 heartbreaking months I had endured in silence. Harold arranged them into sections, then looked straight at me. First, let's talk about Lily and her boyfriend. How long have they lived in your home? 4 years, I answered. His eyebrows lifted slightly. And is there a lease agreement? No, just let them stay. I thought Lily needed support after her divorce. Harold nodded, then said something that made me sit upright. In that case, under Arizona law, you can require them to leave within 30 days. No disputes, no lawsuits. They have no legal right to stay in your house. It felt like the floor lifted beneath me, carrying me toward a light I hadn't seen in months. Truly? I can do that? Completely legal. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from receiving back a power I thought I had lost. Harold went on. As for your assets, I recommend establishing an irrevocable trust. I knew what a trust was, but not the details, so he explained, step by step. A will can be contested, he said calmly. Children can claim you were influenced, pressured, or not mentally sound. I flinched. Jackie had once remarked that older people change their wills often. Clearly, they had considered that angle. But a trust, he said, resting his hand on the documents, cannot be reclaimed, cannot be altered by anyone else, and most importantly, cannot be contested. Once assets are placed into a trust, they are nearly fully protected. You can still use them, still live in your home, still manage your money, but after you pass, no one can fight over or seize anything. I sat, stunned. A rare wave of relief washed through my chest. So, they won't be able to take anything unless I want them to? Harold smiled, softly but with certainty. Exactly. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in this battle. I want to establish the trust, I said immediately, as soon as possible. I don't want them touching anything ever again. Harold made notes quickly, then looked up. But you must understand, this will make them furious. I met his eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. They stopped being family, I said, my voice firm enough to surprise even me, when they started treating me like a wallet. The air in the conference room went still. Harold nodded, not politely, but in acknowledgement of a strength he recognized. Then let's begin, he said. I signed the legal agreement. The sound of the pen sliding across paper felt like a blade cutting through the invisible rope that had bound me for years. Clean, final, freeing. When I stepped outside the office, the sun was still harsh, but it no longer blinded me. The hot wind blew against my face, but I felt lighter, as if I had just walked out of a dark room where I had been trapped for far too long. Standing beside my car, watching the glass buildings reflect the blinding sky, I thought, Eleanor Whitford has entered a new chapter. I am no longer the woman tossed around by circumstances. From today forward, I hold the wheel. Then I opened my car door, started the engine, and felt certainty settle into my bones. My counterattack, the counterattack of a mother long underestimated, had officially begun. I returned home late in the afternoon, carrying 2 thick yellow envelopes Harold had prepared. He emphasized that these were the first step in the legal process, and that how I handed them over mattered less than my resolve, my refusal to yield to tears or rage from people who had thrived on my vulnerability. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hand on the steering wheel staring at the familiar house that suddenly felt foreign, as if it had witnessed far more than I was ready to accept. It had once held laughter, warm dinners, family photos tacked to the walls. Now it felt like a silent battlefield. I inhaled deeply, stepped out of the car, and walked up the stone path to the porch. The envelopes in my hand felt heavy as rocks, but also like shields protecting the rest of my life. Inside, as expected, Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet on the table as if it belonged to him. The TV blared a football game and a sweating beer can sat beside him. Lily lounged on the staircase, scrolling her phone, looking far too comfortable for someone living off another person for 4 years. I stood before them, didn't speak at first, and placed the 2 envelopes on the glass table. The soft slap they made was sharp as a blade. Brandon raised a brow, rude as ever. "What's this?" "Eviction notices," I said, my voice calm. So calm it startled even me. "You 2 have 30 days to leave my house." In that instant, the room froze. Brandon shot up from the sofa, face flushing red, veins rising in his neck. "Are you senile, old woman? This is Lily's family home. We've lived here 4 years. You can't just throw us out like dogs." Every word he spat hit the air, but none of it touched me. I'd heard worse. I'd endured more than enough disrespect to become immune. Lily burst into tears instantly, her sobs flowing with the precision of a rehearsed act. "Mom, how could you do this to me? You know I'm struggling. You know I'm just trying to get back on my feet after the divorce. Mom, you're so cruel." I looked at my daughter, the same one who had feverishly clung to me at 7 years old, the same girl with wide, innocent eyes who used to curl against me when the world felt unfair. Now she cried for money, not love. "Lily," I said slowly, "I heard everything last night. I know what you and Jackie are planning. I know you see me as a wallet, so you don't get to say I've betrayed anyone." Lily froze mid-sob, as if slapped. Brandon shot her a sharp look. Then, reflexively, Lily grabbed her phone and dialed. Jackie, listen. Mom's kicking us out. Something's wrong with her. She gave us these papers. It's like she wants us homeless." I stood with my arms crossed, hearing every word Jackie spoke on speaker. On the other end, Jackie's voice came through, angry but not surprised. "What? I'll be there. Don't say anything else. Let me and Daniel handle it." I pressed my lips together. Handle it. As if I were a malfunctioning appliance, not their mother. Brandon turned toward me, voice raised in threat. "You can't do this. We have rights. I swear. We'll sue. You'll regret this for the rest of your life." I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't shed a tear. I simply repeated the line I had practiced ever since I left Harold's office. "You 2 have 30 days, no more." The room vibrated with their outrage. Lily sobbed harder. Brandon kicked the table leg, knocking over a vase, water spilling onto the rug. I turned away and walked back to my workspace, locking the door, just as Harold advised. I heard Lily's sniffles, Brandon's curses, their frantic whispering. None of it hurt anymore. It only confirmed my decision was right. I opened my notebook and documented each behavior, each word, each reaction. Every detail mattered if they tried anything. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, but not from fear, from the realization that I had stepped into a new version of myself, a woman who protected herself, a woman who no longer mistook silence for kindness, a woman who had endured enough to learn that gentleness is not weakness. When I finished the page, I looked up at the glass panel in my workspace. My reflection stared back, older, tired, but with eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. I was in control. The feeling was so powerful I placed a hand over my chest to steady myself. And what Lily and Jackie didn't know, the truth I had no reason to tell them, was the most important thing of all. Every asset I owned, this house, The woodworking shop, savings, investments, everything had already been transferred into the trust. No one, not a single person, could touch it. Not my daughters, not my son-in-law, not the freeloader in my living room. I closed the notebook and leaned back, filled with a strange calm. The battle had begun, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one pushed into the corner. I was the one stepping forward. I was the one holding the light. I was the one deciding. And silently, I made a promise no one else could hear. Eleanor Whitford will not let anyone take her life from her ever again. I knew from the moment I heard Jackie's car pull into the driveway that the evening wouldn't be just another family dinner. Not after everything that had happened, not after I handed the eviction notices to Lily and Brandon, and certainly not after the whispered schemes Jackie murmured on the phone, words that still felt carved into the walls of my mind. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce, the steam rising and fogging my glasses. I tried to keep everything steady, tried to ensure my hands didn't tremble, even though I knew tonight wasn't about the roasted chicken I was preparing. It was about the final confrontation between me and the daughters I once believed would never betray me. The door opened. Jackie stepped in first, polished as always, hair tied neatly, a stylish plaid jacket, a smile practiced to perfection, but I could see the urgency beneath her makeup. "Mom," Jackie said, as if a peaceful evening awaited us, "I brought fresh bread. We can have it with your dinner." Daniel followed her. His eyes slid past me quickly, then lingered on the living room, where Lily and Brandon sat with tense, hopeful faces, like drowning people clinging to one last life raft. It was clear. They had called Jackie obsessively, enough for her to bring Daniel along as some kind of rescue squad. I didn't hurry to speak. I set the pot down, turned off the stove, wiped my hands, and walked to the dining table I had prepared ahead of time. Everything was tidy and formal, like one final ritual before the truth shattered open. "Let's eat," I said softly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear in the silent house. Dinner began with small talk, Jackie asking about my health, Daniel asking about the woodworking shop, Lily pretending to choke up every time I looked her way, but only a few minutes later, their real purpose began to show. "Mom," Jackie said, setting her glass down, looking at me with an expression carefully crafted to appear thoughtful, "I think it's time you considered selling the house. You're living alone in a place this big. It's not suitable anymore." Daniel nodded as if he were some expert on my life. "Besides," he added, "if you sell now, you'll get a great price. You could move into a more comfortable apartment. We'll help you choose." The words came out like a caring suggestion, but they were sharp as a blade. I stayed silent, watching them. I didn't nod or shake my head. I just looked. That silence made both Jackie and Daniel waver slightly, and they kept pushing. "And if you sell," Jackie continued, her voice smooth as if she'd rehearsed it all afternoon, "you could help us with the down payment on a new house, so our family can stay close." I almost laughed. Before I could respond, Daniel leaned toward me, adding smoothly, "Either way. Later on, all your assets will go to the kids anyway. Why hold on to so much and stress yourself out?" Stress myself out? What did he just say? I heard Lily softly murmur agreement, and Brandon smirked like this was all obvious. And then all the hurt, the collapse, the months of quiet suffering aligned into one straight, steady line running through me. I set my fork down. "All right," I said. "If you all want to talk seriously, then I have something serious to show you." I stood, walked to my office, and returned with the USB Marcy had given me, The one weapon I knew would tear every mask off the faces sitting around my table. I placed the USB in front of Jackie. "Open it." Jackie looked at me, confused. Then she plugged it into her laptop and opened the photo folder. The room died instantly. The first picture, Daniel holding the red-haired woman, their lips almost touching, his hand behind her neck. The second, another angle even clearer, undeniable. The third, the woman's hand wearing a wedding ring. Jackie froze. Her face turned to stone, her lips trembling before going rigid. Daniel went pale, blinking rapidly as if the images might disappear if he denied them long enough. Lily covered her mouth. Brandon swore under his breath, unsure whether to look at me or at Daniel. I folded my arms, my voice calm to the point of cruelty. "This is what happened 2 hours before the wedding. Full metadata, exact timestamp, GPS coordinates, real people, real events." Jackie inhaled sharply, choking on air. "No, no way. Daniel, I say something." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again, his face twisting like someone gripping his throat. I straightened up and looked at each of them. "We're not done," I said. "Let me read the sentence you two said to each other last night." Lily shot to her feet, shouting, "Mom, were you eavesdropping?" "No," I replied. "I heard you. You had the speaker on." And I read, word for word. 2 more months and it's done. Smooth divorce. Wedding gift split 60-40. Mom's old. Easy to fool. No one breathed. No one blinked. Jackie stood so fast her chair crashed backward. "Lily, you actually said that where Mom could hear you?" Lily stammered. I didn't know Mom. Brandon cursed again, louder this time. I looked at them. 4 people. 4 faces exposing guilt and fear. A family I once thought I had, now reduced to a swamp where each one had tried to drag me under. I placed my hand on the table and said the line I had prepared exactly for this moment. "I know you all see me as a wallet, but today, I'm informing you of one thing." 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. All of my assets, my house, my money, my shop, have been moved into a trust, and a trust cannot be sued, cannot be touched, cannot be broken. No one moved. I continued. "Later on, by law, each of you will receive the minimum share, not 1 cent more." Jackie nearly collapsed back into her chair. Daniel gripped the edge of the table, white as a sheet. Lily began to cry. Brandon muttered curses, but his voice was shaking. I stood up. "Dinner is over." I left behind a table full of cold food and 4 people watching their world collapse in an instant, like walls losing their foundation. I walked into the hallway, feeling as though I had stepped out of a room filled with toxic smoke. Behind me, I heard Jackie sobbing, Daniel mumbling something like an apology, Lily crying out in a mix of desperation and rage. But none of it touched me anymore. In that moment, I understood perfectly. My family didn't fall apart tonight. It fell apart long ago. Tonight, they simply saw what was left of it, clear and bare, like the truth I had laid on the table. The days after that fateful dinner, my house felt like a dying animal thrashing in chaos before it finally surrendered. Every wall, every door seemed to witness something I never imagined facing at 68. Psychological games from the very children I spent my life loving. Lily and Brandon behaved like people with nothing left to lose, or who believed that if they pushed hard enough, I would break the way I always had. But they miscalculated. I was no longer the mother who could be manipulated by tears. I'm struggling, or empty promises of a future they never intended to honor. In the first 3 days, their strategy was clear. Noise, disruption, attempts to rattle me. In the morning when I came downstairs, Lily was blasting loud electronic music, making the dishes on the rack tremble. She'd never listened to that genre before, let alone blasted it inside a house with an elderly person. I brewed my coffee as if I heard nothing. Lily glanced at me, challenging. "Doesn't this bother you?" I simply replied, "No." Brandon slammed the door every time he went out, trying to shake the walls. Sometimes he left empty beer cans on the dining table and nudged them to fall, watching me like he was waiting for me to snap, but I said nothing. At night, they tried a different tactic. Lily tried frightening me, flicking hallway lights on and off when I walked through, cracking my door open, then closing it, or sitting in the dark living room whispering things like, "Being alone at your age. Dangerous things can happen." I knew the game. Harold warned me. When exploiters lose control, they will do anything to regain it. Still, I stayed silent. One night, near midnight, Lily stood outside my office door, voice trembling as if she were truly heartbroken. "Mom, I'm sorry, I really am. I don't know what Jackie told you, but I was wrong. Brandon, he controls me. I don't want this." I remained at my desk, pen moving across the page just as Harold instructed. I let her finish, then opened the door. She was crying. Real tears or a perfect imitation. But I'd been Lily's mother her whole life. I knew her inside and out. "What do you want?" I asked. Lily blinked, hesitated only a second. If you give me more time or help with the deposit on a new place, I promise." That was when I cut her off, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. "If you were truly sorry, you would apologize without asking for anything." Lily froze for 2 seconds. Then her face changed entirely, the mask falling like shattered glass. "Fine," she yelled. "Then stay here alone. Brandon's right, you're selfish. Don't blame anyone later." She stormed upstairs, each step pounding with rage. I returned to my desk and wrote, Day 4. Lily shifted from remorse, request money, anger. Failed. Brandon was different. He didn't plead. He threatened. One afternoon, he stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed, blocking my path. "You know what people will say, right?" he growled. "They'll say you kicked your own daughter out. You think you'll live peacefully after that?" I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He mirrored me. I stepped the other way. He blocked again. I met his eyes, my voice firm. "Whether I live peacefully or not is none of your concern." He clenched his jaw, but this time he backed away. Every detail I recorded. Harold said it was vital if they tried to flip the story, claim I was unstable or abusive. I never imagined my daughter and the man she dragged into my home would stoop so low, but that was before I learned the truth. The low point of their desperation came when Jackie sent a text first. "Mom, I'm bringing someone to help you. You're not well. You need an evaluation." Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s stood outside, wearing a psychologist's badge, with Jackie beside her. Her face a mix of concern and superiority, like someone preparing to intervene in another person's life, while believing it's for their own good. "Hi, Mom," Jackie said gently, as if she hadn't been exposed with infidelity the night before. "This is Dr. Monroe. I think you're under a lot of stress and need—" I cut her off. "No." Dr. Monroe smiled professionally. "Mrs. Whitford, we only want to determine whether—" "I did not invite you into my home," I said, staring directly at her. "Please leave." Jackie flushed. "You're not acting rational. We just want to make sure you're capable." I opened the door wider, my voice icy. "If you are not off my porch in 3 seconds, I will call the police and report trespassing." Both women froze. Then Dr. Monroe stepped back. Jackie stiffened, saying nothing. I closed the door, not harshly but decisively. In the silence of the house, I heard Lily whisper from the stairs, "What happened? She kicked you out." Jackie hissed back, "Fine, let her destroy herself. Just watch." They left. And for the first time in months, hearing my daughter's voice didn't frighten me. It didn't hurt. It just felt empty, followed by a strange, unexpected sense of relief. In the days that followed, things in the house began breaking in suspicious ways. A picture frame fell. A doorknob was twisted out of alignment. A ceramic vase I had bought 20 years ago was smashed. But instead of getting angry, I picked up my phone, photographed each item, and saved everything into the folder labeled Legal Documents Section B. Every time I pressed the shutter, I felt a little stronger, because I was no longer fighting with emotion. I was fighting with clarity. On the 10th day of the eviction notice, Lily and Brandon finally began packing boxes. Their arguments echoed through the house. Blame, frustration, fear. Lily cried, then screamed. Brandon cursed and pounded on the walls, the thuds shaking the plaster but never breaking the calm I was building for myself inside my office. I closed the door, sat at my desk, turned on the warm lamp, and opened my notebook. New lines flowed steadily across the page. 10th day. They know I've changed. No more negotiating, no more hesitation, no room left for pity that can be exploited. I set my pen down and leaned back. For the first time in many years, I felt serene. Strangely, that serenity came from the deepest place of pain, yet it was also where strength was born. I had exhausted myself by loving the wrong way. Now I was learning to love the right person, myself, and my family, the ones who thought I would endure forever, finally understood. Eleanor Whitford would not be silent anymore, and if I ever chose silence again, it would be a weapon, not a weakness. The 30th day arrived as softly as a breath, yet as heavy as a stone on my chest, not because I was afraid or unsure, but because it was the day I would watch a rotten chapter of my life finally close. I woke at 6 a.m. to the Arizona sunlight slipping through the blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the wooden floor. Today, the house would change. Today, I would change. I made my coffee and set the cup on the table in silence. There were no pounding footsteps on the stairs, no fights erupting in the living room, no beer cans rolling across the floor. It felt like the quiet before a storm, except I no longer feared storms. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Harold standing there, immaculate as always, holding a stack of documents. Beside him were 2 Scottsdale police officers, a man around 40 and a woman whose stern eyes softened when she met mine. "Mrs. Whitford," Harold said, "I'll be with you through the entire process. Everything is within the law. No one will give you trouble again." I nodded. In that moment, I felt like 2 solid walls had risen behind me. We stepped inside. Lily and Brandon had no idea the police were coming. Lily was sprawled on the sofa, hair messy, phone in hand. Brandon was still asleep, crumpled in a blanket like a lazy child. When they saw the officers, Lily shot upright as if doused with cold water. "What is this?" she screamed. Brandon jerked awake, eyes wide, panic flashing into anger in a heartbeat. "What the hell is going on?" The lead officer spoke in a firm but professional tone. "Today is day 30 since the eviction notice was delivered. You both have 2 hours to pack your belongings and leave this property." The room exploded instantly. Lily shrieked, "No, no, no! Mom, you can't do this to me. This is my home. I've lived here for 4 years." The officer repeated calmly, There is no rental agreement. This is the homeowner's legal right, and Mrs. Whitford followed every required step. Brandon lunged toward me, pointing a finger in my face. "You're insane! You'll regret this! You think this is right?" Harold stepped forward like a quiet shield. "If you continue threatening her, we are authorized to restrain you." Brandon backed up, still cursing, kicking the wall hard enough to knock plaster loose. Lily collapsed on the couch, sobbing. "Mom, please, I'm not ready. I have nowhere to go." I stood there looking at my daughter, the same child who once held my hand when she feared the dark, the same child who slept on my chest as a baby. But I didn't see that little girl anymore. I saw a woman who had learned to survive through manipulation, draining the mother who gave her everything. "Why are you doing this?" Lily wailed. "Why are you throwing your daughter out?" I inhaled slowly. My heart didn't hurt the way it used to. Now there was only clarity. "Because you threw me out of your heart first," I said, "and I cannot live with people who see me as a wallet." Lily broke into harder sobs, but I didn't move. The officers started the timer. 2 hours. 2 short hours that felt like a lifetime to Lily and Brandon. They ran upstairs, dragging suitcases down, clothes spilling everywhere, shouting at each other. Lily accusing me of cruelty, Brandon pounding on furniture, Lily screaming that I was heartless and ungrateful and not a real mother. I stood in the kitchen, holding my coffee, looking out into the backyard, the same yard where Jackie used to play ball, where my old dog slept in the shade, where I'd once planted flowers with my husband. Now it bore witness to a painful but necessary cleansing. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. Relieved like someone taking off a heavy, suffocating armor they had been forced to wear for 4 years. 2 hours passed. Lily and Brandon came down the stairs with the last of their boxes. Lily's eyes were swollen, mascara streaked across her cheeks. Brandon was trembling with anger. They walked out to the porch and loaded their belongings into Brandon's old brown car. He slammed the trunk hard enough to shake the frame. Lily turned back, hatred and hurt mixing in her eyes. "You're going to live alone for the rest of your life," she said, her voice cracked and venomous. I stood tall, no tears, no trembling. "Better alone," I replied, "than surrounded by people who only use me." Lily yanked the car door open. Brandon started the engine. The old vehicle rumbled out of the driveway and disappeared behind the trees. The officers thanked me and left. Harold shook my hand, firm, steady. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. I'm proud of you." When the door closed, a silence unlike anything I'd heard in years washed over the house. A silence. So deep I could hear my own breath. A silence. So complete the ticking clock sounded alive. A silence that finally let me realize this was the first time in 4 years I had the right to peace. I walked to the living room chair, the one I never dared sit in because Brandon claimed it as his spot, and sat down. My face felt cold. My back ached. Then, the tears came. Not because I had lost my children, not because I was hurt, not because I was lonely, but because after 4 years, after dozens of sleepless nights, after having my heart squeezed by betrayal over and over, I finally felt myself return. I had found my way back to who I was. I had chosen myself, and it was the best choice I had ever made. One quiet morning, as I was brewing chamomile tea to start my day, the phone rang. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, painting soft stripes across the walnut countertop I loved so much. Everything felt peaceful, so when the phone buzzed, I sensed the stillness was about to be disturbed. The caller ID read, Jackie. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Not out of fear, because I had broken the habit of rushing in to comfort her every time she was upset. I wanted to respond with the calm I had fought so hard to earn. "When will you stop destroying my family?" Jackie said. No greeting, no breath, just an attack as if I were the cause of every misery in her life. I sat down, hands wrapped around the warm cup. My voice was soft, steady. "Jackie, I'm not destroying your family. I'm simply refusing to let it destroy me." Silence, a few seconds long. I could practically hear Jackie's angry breathing, as if my words wounded her more than anything else could. Then her voice cracked, furious, desperate. "If you hadn't interfered, if you hadn't blown up everything with Daniel, none of this would have happened." I closed my eyes, recalling the photos Marcy had given me, the messages Lily overheard, the months of Jackie letting me pay for everything, every bill, every debt, every mistake. "No, Jackie," I said. "Your marriage fell apart because you and Daniel were using each other for money, not because of me. I wasn't the one cheating 2 hours before the wedding, and I wasn't the one calling me own mother easy to fool." She fell silent again, so long I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice returned, brittle as dry leaves. "You'll regret this, I swear." I simply answered, "I've regretted enough for the past 30 years, Jackie. Now it's time I choose for myself." I was the one who hung up, something I had never done before. A few days later, I was watering the lavender along the back porch when my phone pinged with a message. I wiped my hands and checked it. "Daniel Foster, if you stay quiet about the photos, I'll send you $10,000. I want this resolved fast." I stared at the text, not angry, not shocked, just amused. He thought my dignity, my self-respect, the betrayal of my daughter, his brazen infidelity right before the ceremony were worth $10,000? I pressed block without replying a single word. The phone went still again, as if it too felt relieved to cut off something toxic. Word about the divorce spread faster than I expected, not because I talked. I hadn't said a single thing to anyone. But people who live by deceit rarely keep secrets well, especially when their lives start breaking apart piece by piece. According to what Harold heard from a colleague who handled divorce cases, Jackie and Daniel's battle resembled a wildfire, furious, chaotic, consuming everything they had tried to build on lies. Jackie accused Daniel of infidelity. Daniel accused Jackie of hiding wedding money. They dragged each other between court and lawyers' offices like two drunk strangers fighting in the street. The wedding gifts, $47,000 from people who trusted them, evaporated like steam. It all turned into legal fees, court costs, investigative expenses, and other pointless attempts to prove the other one was worse. In the end, they were left with nothing but resentment and two empty skies. And I watched from afar, not bitter, not pleased, simply detached, as though I were watching a play that once threatened to drown me, but now I had stepped off the stage entirely. One evening, I sat on the porch with a light shawl over my shoulders, watching the sunset burn the sky orange. I turned on the warm lights along the stone path, lavender scent drifting in the breeze. For the first time in ages, I truly felt alive, not surviving, but living. I placed my hand over my chest, where my heart still beat steadily, strongly. I no longer felt heavy when thinking of Jackie. I no longer hurt when thinking of Lily. I no longer blamed myself for giving too much. I felt only one simple truth. Freedom is worth more than anything. More than expectations, more than the weight of motherhood, more than the fear of loneliness they used to control me. Freedom is knowing I don't owe my life to anyone. Freedom is standing up and walking out of the dark without waiting for someone to pull me. Freedom is choosing peace, choosing myself, choosing a path free of those who see me as property. And as the sky turned purple, I smiled. A real smile, one that made my eyes sting just a little. I had lost much, but I had found the most precious thing again, myself. Eleanor Whitford, a woman who finally understood that sacrifice is not destiny. It is a choice, and starting today, I choose freedom. 3 weeks passed after Lily and Brandon left the house, and what surprised me most wasn't their absence, but the absence of the noise they carried with them. The house was so spacious I could hear the wind slipping through the door frame, the wood expanding and contracting with the change in temperature, and even the echo of my own footsteps across the clean wooden floor. For 4 years, I hadn't realized how beautiful those sounds were, gentle, honest, and untouched by resentment, demands, or disrespect. I lived alone, and for the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely. The first morning after they left, I woke at 7 a.m., went down to the kitchen, and stood there for quite a while. The coffee machine Brandon had dropped countless times stood intact on the counter, gleaming under the sunlight. I placed a coffee pot in, pressed the button, and listened to the steady hum of the machine, without fearing someone would yank the plug or shout about needing the stove, or complain about anything except maybe that the coffee would brew, a little stronger than I liked. That small piece made me laugh, a real laugh, soft as smoke, one that felt like it had been asleep inside me for years. On the third day, I took out the paintbrush set my husband had given me in 1985, a gift I had never truly used. Back then, life was too busy. Then came the children, then the store, then his illness. And I pushed my own interests aside as if they were luxuries I didn't deserve. I sat at the dining table, spread out the paper, set the palette. Sunlight passed through the window and shimmered across the watercolors like pieces of glass. For the first time in 4 decades, I dipped a brush into blue and touched it to paper. The first stroke trembled, the second steadied, the third, my mind finally let go. I painted the backyard, the lemon tree my husband planted when Jackie was born, the wooden chair where I used to read to Lily. Everything appeared imperfect, proportionally wrong, yet painfully true. When I finished, I didn't cry. I simply placed my hand over my heart and felt a gentle easing ripple outward like circles on water. I had returned to myself, the woman I was before I drowned under duty and endless sacrifice. A week later, I joined a woodworking repair class for older adults at the community center. I had always thought I only knew how to run a store, that working with tools was men's work. But standing before a piece of wood, holding a chisel, hearing fibers split under my hands, it made me feel stronger than I ever had. In the class was Margaret, 82, a cheerful widow who loved telling stories about her late husband. Philip, a veteran with slightly trembling hands but unwavering patience. And Laura, 50, newly divorced and learning how to begin again. I sat among them holding a light mallet and realized I wasn't lost. I wasn't left behind. I belonged here. None of them knew my story, and I didn't need to tell it. We shared through laughter, through borrowing sandpaper, through lifting each other up when a piece of wood broke the wrong way. That evening, I returned home with the scent of fresh lumber on my hands and a heart full of energy. In the second week, I decided to renovate the kitchen, a task I should have done long ago but kept postponing out of fear of inconveniencing the freeloaders living under my roof. I bought new wall cabinets, a power screwdriver, a measuring tape, and a roll of vinyl covering. The store clerk was shocked I intended to do it myself. It took me 2 days to remove the old cabinets, sand the surfaces, measure carefully, and install each unit. At times, I was so tired I had to sit on the floor, but the feeling of rebuilding my own home kept lifting me back to my feet. When I mounted the final cabinet, I leaned against the counter, sweat sliding down my temple, and thought, "Eleanor, you were never old. You were just held down by people who dragged you under." In that moment, I felt young again, not in age, but in spirit. That weekend, Harold emailed, "Your trust is complete. Your assets are fully protected. No one can alter or dispute anything." I read those lines 3 times. Each time felt like placing another solid stone beneath the foundation of my new life. I no longer had to fear Jackie suing. I no longer had to fear Lily demanding a share of the house. I no longer had to fear Daniel returning with lies. I no longer had to fear losing everything I had spent my life building. I sat quietly, then burst into a long, clear laugh, the kind I couldn't remember producing in years. That afternoon, while I was sorting my paintbrushes, the phone rang. Marcy Donalds, the photographer who helped me see the truth. I answered. Her voice was warm, slightly hesitant. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about you these past weeks, wondering if you're all right. You said you'd check in. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I looked at the half-finished painting on my table, blue sky strokes and soft lavender. I smiled. "I'm all right, Marcy. Actually, I'm better than ever." She exhaled in relief. "I'm so glad to hear that." I picked up my car keys. "Marcy," I said, my voice carrying a sincerity even I could recognize as new. "I owe you a thank you. You helped me escape a life that was going in the wrong direction. Are you free for coffee? My treat." On the other end, she laughed, simple and warm as late afternoon sunlight. "I'd love that." I hung up. I looked around my house, for the first time completely mine. I looked at my life, for the first time completely my own. I grabbed my purse, stepped outside, and took a deep, full breath. Freedom isn't just the absence of chains. Freedom is when your heart feels light enough to lift. And I, Eleanor Whitford, was beginning to lift. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the thin scarf around my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I saw no fear or exhaustion in my eyes. Instead, I saw clarity, ease, and something I thought I had lost: respect for myself. 3 months earlier, I had been a mother used, cornered, treated like a walking wallet. I endured, bent myself in half, convinced that was what a mother must do, that love meant unconditional sacrifice. But betrayal and cruelty from the very people I raised taught me a lesson I should have learned long ago. Love does not include allowing others to destroy you. Sacrifice is not a mother's destiny. Boundaries are part of love, not the opposite of it. When I drew my first boundary, I thought I would collapse. Instead, it held me up. I went from a woman trembling when her daughter mocked her, old and easy to fool, to the woman who stood tall at her doorway and said clearly, "You have 30 days to leave." I went from someone heartbroken by her son-in-law cheating on the wedding day to someone who placed a USB on the table and revealed the truth without a hint of hesitation. I went from someone who believed life after 60 was nothing but waiting to someone rewriting her life at 68 with new colors, new joy, and new self-respect. Looking back, I realized something important. I was never alone. There was Marcy, the woman who stayed up late to send me the photos that changed my life. There was Harold, the calm, persistent attorney who handed me the legal shield that protected my future. There were neighbors who left bread on my porch or asked if I needed help fixing a faucet. There were strangers who smiled when they saw me carrying a basket of flowers, as if they sensed the lighter steps beneath my feet. I once thought I was left with an empty house, but really, I had a small world full of quiet kindness, one I had been too drained to notice before. I slipped my purse over my shoulder. Inside were only my wallet, my phone, and the small notebook where I recorded my healing. I locked the door, stepped onto the porch, and when I opened the garage, the Scottsdale sunlight poured in, bright and pure. After many years, I was about to walk into my first coffee outing, not a tense family meeting, not a stressful appointment with a lawyer, but a simple, sincere invitation. A meeting to say thank you, a meeting to open the door to a new chapter. I looked up at the sky, wide and blue. White clouds drifted gently like clean pages, and the breeze carried the scent of desert dust and the lavender blooming at my doorstep. I smiled, a real smile rising from the deepest part of me. I whispered, "The rest of my life is mine, and no one else's." And I believed it with everything inside me. After more than 40 years of being a mother, a wife, a woman carrying the world for everyone else, I had forgotten something simple. I also deserved a life of my own. Today, at 68, I stepped into the sunlight with weightless feet, as if I had just been freed after years imprisoned by expectations and unspoken obligations. The Scottsdale sky was so blue it felt like I was staring at an unwritten map, not one to follow, but one I would draw myself. I closed the garage door, held the car keys, but paused for a few seconds just to breathe, not to gather courage, but to savor the rare feeling of full autonomy. A new chapter begins not with thunder or shouting or the crash of broken things, but with the soft sound of my own footsteps on the concrete, leading me to the place I should have reached long ago. I opened the car door. I stepped in. I smiled. A new life, unburdened, unblamed, free from the shadows of exploitation, was unfolding right before me, and I knew I was ready. Thank you for staying with me all the way to these final lines of my journey. If you're listening to my story, perhaps somewhere in your own life you've had a crossroads too, a moment when you had to stand up and protect yourself even while your heart was still bleeding. At any age, we all deserve peace, respect, and a life that belongs to us. I would love to know, where are you watching this from? Did any part of my journey remind you of your own or make you reflect on something in your past? Feel free to share in the comments. Your story might become the strength someone else needs to rise again. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, awakening boundaries, and rediscovering yourself after years of sacrifice, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next stories. I'm truly grateful to have you here, because sometimes just one more person listening can make someone's whole world feel warmer.